AITA for telling my ex-best friend's fiancé about her affair right before their wedding. I, 29-year-old female, sent proof of my former best friend's affair to her fiancé 2 days before their wedding, causing the wedding to be canceled. She's destroyed and everyone's calling me vindictive, but I think he deserved to know the truth. My ex-best friend Sarah, 28-year-old female, and I were inseparable for 15 years until last year, when she started dating my ex-boyfriend Tom just 3 months after he dumped me. Tom and I had dated for 4 years, and the breakup was devastating. He'd blindsided me by saying he'd fallen out of love. Sarah had been my main support system through the breakup, constantly telling me I deserved better and that Tom was a jerk for how he'd ended things. Then I found out through mutual friends that Sarah and Tom were together. When I confronted her, she claimed they'd fallen in love and hadn't meant to hurt me. She said I was being immature for not supporting their happiness. I told her our friendship was over and cut contact with both of them. Sarah got engaged to someone else, Ryan, about 8 months ago. They'd apparently been dating while she was still seeing Tom, which is when she dumped Tom to be with Ryan. I heard through the grapevine that Sarah had told Ryan I was crazy and jealous, and that's why we weren't friends anymore. 2 months ago, I ran into Tom at a coffee shop. We talked briefly, and he mentioned he'd recently seen Sarah. I was surprised since I'd thought their relationship had ended badly. Tom then casually revealed that he and Sarah had been hooking up regularly for the past 6 months, the entire time she'd been engaged to Ryan. He seemed to think I already knew and wouldn't care. I was shocked. Sarah had moved on from our friendship and I'd accepted that, but she was cheating on her fiancé with my ex-boyfriend while planning a wedding. I struggled with whether to tell Ryan. Part of me wanted to stay out of it. Sarah wasn't my friend anymore and her relationships weren't my business. But another part felt Ryan deserved to know he was marrying someone who was actively cheating on him. I decided to tell him. I got proof first. I asked Tom to show me text messages between him and Sarah, which he did, seemingly amused by the drama. The messages clearly showed they'd been sleeping together regularly and included Sarah saying she couldn't wait to see him just days before her wedding. I sent Ryan the screenshots 2 days before the wedding with a message explaining who I was and that I felt he deserved to know the truth before marrying Sarah. I didn't editorialize or try to influence his decision, just provided evidence and let him decide what to do. Ryan canceled the wedding. According to mutual friends, he confronted Sarah with the evidence, and she initially denied it, then admitted it and claimed it was just physical and meant nothing. Ryan called off the wedding and ended their relationship. The fallout has been massive. Sarah has sent me dozens of messages calling me a vindictive bitch who destroyed her life out of jealousy. She claims I couldn't stand seeing her happy after she'd moved on from our friendship. She says even if she made mistakes, publicly humiliating her by canceling her wedding was cruel revenge that went way too far. Sarah's family is furious with me. Her mother called me saying I'd always been jealous of Sarah and had finally found a way to destroy her happiness. Her sister posted on social media about toxic people who can't let go of grudges, and several people who know the situation have commented agreeing it was obviously about me. Many of our mutual friends have taken Sarah's side. They say yes, Sarah was cheating, but I only told Ryan to hurt Sarah, not to help Ryan. They argue that my timing, 2 days before the wedding, proves I wanted maximum damage. They say if I'd genuinely cared about Ryan knowing the truth, I would have told him months ago when I found out, not waited until right before the wedding, when cancellation would be most costly and embarrassing. Some friends have supported me. They point out Sarah was actively deceiving Ryan, and he had a right to know before legally binding himself to her. They say the timing was awkward, but there's never a good time to reveal infidelity, and better before marriage than after. They note that I provided evidence and let Ryan make his own decision rather than trying to manipulate the situation. My sister thinks I'm TA. She says my motivation was clearly revenge. Sarah had hurt me by dating Tom, and I'd been waiting for an opportunity to hurt her back. She argues that I don't even know Ryan and wasn't concerned about his well-being. I just wanted to destroy Sarah's wedding. She says if I'd wanted to do the right thing, I would have told Ryan immediately upon learning about the affair, rather than sitting on the information for 2 months. My boyfriend is conflicted. He agrees Sarah deserved to face consequences for cheating and that Ryan deserved to know the truth. But he's uncomfortable with how satisfied I seemed when the wedding was canceled. He says my anger towards Sarah is understandable, but I should examine whether I told Ryan to help him or to hurt Sarah. Honestly, I'm not sure of my own motivations anymore. I do think Ryan deserved to know. Nobody should marry someone who's actively cheating on them. But I can't deny I felt satisfaction when the wedding was canceled. After Sarah betrayed our friendship and then painted me as the villain to her new social circle, watching her face consequences felt like justice. But was it justice or revenge? The outcome was the same. Ryan learned the truth and made an informed decision. Does my motivation matter if the action itself was providing truthful information to someone who deserved it? AITA for telling Ryan about Sarah's affair? Or was I justified in ensuring he didn't marry someone who was cheating on him? Update. Responses are mixed but leaning toward ESH. Sarah for cheating, me for the suspicious timing and potentially revenge-driven motivation. Ryan has reached out to thank me. He said he's devastated, but grateful he learned the truth before marriage rather than after. He confirmed he'd had no idea about Sarah's affair with Tom, and said the wedding cancellation was embarrassing, but nothing compared to being legally bound to someone who'd betray him so completely. He asked why I'd waited 2 months to tell him, which I couldn't answer honestly. Sarah has apparently had a breakdown. According to mutual friends, she's lost her job. She worked at her father's company and he fired her in his anger about the canceled wedding. Her apartment, she'd been living with Ryan and planning to move into his house after the wedding, and most of her friend group. She's moved back with her parents and is in therapy. My ex Tom has been gleefully stirring the pot, apparently telling people that he and Sarah are back together now that her engagement is over. Sarah has publicly denied this and called him a liar, but the drama has made everything worse for her reputation. The financial damage to Sarah and her family is significant. They'd spent over $50,000 on the wedding: venue, catering, flowers, photographer, everything. Most deposits were non-refundable. Sarah's father is apparently threatening to sue me for intentional interference with business relations or something, though my attorney says he has no case. Several people who initially defended me have changed their positions after seeing the extent of Sarah's downfall. They say, yes, she was wrong to cheat, but I've essentially destroyed her entire life. They argue that natural consequences of infidelity would have been Ryan discovering the affair on his own, or Sarah's guilt catching up with her, not me weaponizing the information at the worst possible moment. My sister has stopped speaking to me. She says she's embarrassed to be related to someone who'd be so vindictive and cruel. She thinks I'm a mean girl who disguised revenge as doing the right thing and won't admit that hurting Sarah was always the goal. My boyfriend has become increasingly distant. He says he's realized I'm capable of calculated cruelty that scares him. He's questioning whether I'd do something similar to him if we ever had problems in our relationship. We're on a break while he decides if he wants to continue dating me. Reflecting honestly, I do think Ryan deserved to know about the affair, but I can't deny the timing was strategic. I sat on the information for 2 months and told Ryan right before the wedding because I knew that timing would cause maximum disruption. If my only motivation had been Ryan's well-being, I would have told him immediately upon learning about the affair. So yes, I wanted to help Ryan avoid a bad marriage, but I also wanted Sarah to face consequences for how she'd treated me and for her pattern of betrayal. Both things can be true, but the revenge motivation probably makes me TA, even if the action itself was defensible. I'm paying a price too. Lost friendships, damaged relationship with my sister, potential end of my romantic relationship, reputation in our community as someone vindictive and cruel. I tell myself it was worth it to save Ryan from marrying a cheater, but mostly, I just feel empty. Reddit says ESH, and I'm starting to agree. Sarah absolutely shouldn't have been cheating, but I absolutely used that information as a weapon at the most damaging possible moment. We're both assholes, just in different ways. I ruined my coworker's promotion after she sabotaged me during my maternity leave. When I, 33, went on maternity leave last year, I trusted my coworker Stephanie, 35, to handle my accounts. We'd worked together for 4 years at our marketing firm, and I considered her a friend. She was supposed to maintain client relationships and keep projects moving until I returned. I trained her thoroughly before I left, introduced her to all my clients, and left detailed documentation for everything. My daughter was born in August, and I took 12 weeks of leave. During that time, I'd occasionally check emails just to stay somewhat in the loop. I noticed Stephanie was CCing our boss Amanda on a lot of client communications, which seemed excessive, but I figured she was just being thorough. Some clients emailed me directly saying they missed working with me and couldn't wait for me to return. That felt good. When I came back in November, something felt off immediately. Amanda seemed distant during our welcome back meeting. 3 of my biggest clients had been permanently reassigned to Stephanie. Amanda said the clients had requested to continue working with her since they'd built such strong relationships during my leave. I was shocked, but tried to be professional about it. Then I started hearing things. One of my remaining clients mentioned casually that they'd heard I might not be returning full-time after having a baby. Another said Stephanie had told them I was considering leaving the company. None of this was true. I'd always planned to return full-time and had never said otherwise. I dug deeper. I got access to email chains from while I was gone and found messages where Stephanie had told clients I was struggling with postpartum issues and might not come back. She'd positioned herself as the reliable alternative. She'd also been sending Amanda weekly updates, framing my accounts as if they were falling apart before she stepped in to save them. Taking credit for work I'd set up before leaving. She'd systematically undermined me while I was on protected leave to steal my accounts and position herself for advancement. I started documenting everything I found. Emails where Stephanie had lied about my intentions to return. Messages where she'd taken credit for strategies I'd developed. Client notes showing she'd encouraged them to request permanent reassignment. I compiled it all into a detailed file with timestamps and context. I also reached out directly to the clients who'd been reassigned. I asked them straightforward questions about what they'd been told about my leave and return. 2 of them admitted Stephanie had strongly implied I wasn't coming back and had suggested they'd be better off working with her permanently. One forwarded me an email where Stephanie had explicitly said I was dealing with personal issues that would affect my availability. That email was the smoking gun. Stephanie had made specific claims about my personal life and work commitment while I was on maternity leave, which is illegal discrimination under FMLA protections. I scheduled a meeting with Amanda and brought everything. I showed her the documented pattern of Stephanie lying to clients about my return, taking credit for my work, and making discriminatory statements about my maternity leave. I pointed out that reassigning my accounts based on false information Stephanie had spread was potentially a violation of my rights under federal leave protections. Amanda's face went white. She clearly hadn't known the full scope of what Stephanie had done. She'd been fed a narrative about clients naturally gravitating to Stephanie and had made decisions based on fraudulent information. The company launched an investigation. HR interviewed clients, reviewed email records, and talked to other team members. Several people confirmed they'd heard Stephanie making comments about how I probably wouldn't prioritize work the same way after becoming a mother. The evidence was overwhelming. Stephanie was fired within 2 weeks. Not just for what she'd done to me, but because the company's lawyers said keeping her created major liability given the FMLA violations. My accounts were returned to me, which created awkward transitions with clients who'd been told I wasn't coming back. Amanda apologized profusely, and I got a significant raise as what they called an equity adjustment, but was clearly hush money. Here's where it gets complicated. The promotion Stephanie had been angling for, the one she'd sabotaged me to get, opened up again 3 months later. I applied for it and got it, partly based on my strong client relationships and partly because I'd proven I could handle adversity professionally. I'm now Stephanie's former position, plus managing 2 other team members. But Stephanie's career is destroyed. She's been unemployed for 7 months. I know because we have mutual connections, and word travels in our industry. When potential employers call our company for references, HR confirms her termination was related to workplace misconduct and FMLA violations. That's effectively a blacklist in our field. She's apparently struggling financially and had to move back in with her parents at 36. Her sister contacted me last month saying Stephanie was in therapy for depression and asking if I'd be willing to provide a neutral reference, or at least not block her from getting jobs. She said Stephanie made a terrible mistake, but didn't deserve to have her entire career ruined. She mentioned Stephanie had been under a lot of pressure from her husband about money and had panicked. My husband says Stephanie's unemployment isn't my fault, that she did this to herself. My mom thinks I should offer some kind of reference to help her move on, that I've already won by getting my job back and the promotion. My best friend says absolutely not, that Stephanie tried to destroy my career while I was on maternity leave and deserves everything she's getting. The thing that bothers me is that I knew exactly what would happen when I reported her. I knew the FMLA violations would likely get her fired. I knew that being fired for discrimination issues would tank her career in our industry. I made the choice to push forward with the complaint, knowing it would destroy her professionally, not just get my accounts back. I could have handled it differently. I could have confronted Stephanie privately first, or asked for my accounts back without detailing all the legal violations. But I wanted her punished. I wanted her to face serious consequences for what she'd done. And now, she's facing consequences that extend far beyond what she did to me. Her kids are apparently struggling because they had to change schools when she moved. Her marriage is strained because of the financial pressure. She's on antidepressants, and I'm thriving in the promotion she tried to steal from me, partly because she's no longer competition. Was I justified in reporting everything, knowing it would end her career? Or should I have found a less destructive way to handle it? Am I the for telling my ex-best friend's fiancé about her affair right before their wedding? I, 29-year-old female, sent proof of my former best friend's affair to her fiancé 2 days before their wedding, causing the wedding to be canceled. She's destroyed, and everyone's calling me vindictive, but I think he deserved to know the truth. My ex-best friend, Sarah, 28-year-old female, and I were inseparable for 15 years until last year when she started dating my ex-boyfriend Tom, just 3 months after he dumped me. Tom and I had dated for 4 years, and the breakup was devastating. He'd blindsided me by saying he'd fallen out of love. Sarah had been my main support system through the breakup, constantly telling me I deserved better, and that Tom was a jerk for how he'd ended things. Then I found out through mutual friends that Sarah and Tom were together. When I confronted her, she claimed they'd fallen in love and hadn't meant to hurt me. She said I was being immature for not supporting their happiness. I told her our friendship was over and cut contact with both of them. Sarah got engaged to someone else, Ryan, about 8 months ago. They'd apparently been dating while she was still seeing Tom, which is when she dumped Tom to be with Ryan. I heard through the grapevine that Sarah had told Ryan I was crazy and jealous, and that's why we weren't friends anymore. 2 months ago, I ran into Tom at a coffee shop. We talked briefly, and he mentioned he'd recently seen Sarah. I was surprised, since I'd thought their relationship had ended badly. Tom then casually revealed that he and Sarah had been hooking up regularly for the past 6 months, the entire time she'd been engaged to Ryan. He seemed to think I already knew and wouldn't care. I was shocked. Sarah had moved on from our friendship and I'd accepted that, but she was cheating on her fiancé with my ex-boyfriend while planning a wedding. I struggled with whether to tell Ryan. Part of me wanted to stay out of it. Sarah wasn't my friend anymore, and her relationships weren't my business. But another part felt Ryan deserved to know he was marrying someone who was actively cheating on him. I decided to tell him. I got proof first. I asked Tom to show me text messages between him and Sarah, which he did, seemingly amused by the drama. The messages clearly showed they'd been sleeping together regularly and included Sarah saying she couldn't wait to see him just days before her wedding. I sent Ryan the screenshots 2 days before the wedding with a message explaining who I was and that I felt he deserved to know the truth before marrying Sarah. I didn't editorialize or try to influence his decision, just provided evidence and let him decide what to do. Ryan canceled the wedding. According to mutual friends, he confronted Sarah with the evidence and she initially denied it, then admitted it and claimed it was just physical and meant nothing. Ryan called off the wedding and ended their relationship. The fallout has been massive. Sarah has sent me dozens of messages calling me a vindictive bitch who destroyed her life out of jealousy. She claims I couldn't stand seeing her happy after she'd moved on from our friendship. She says even if she made mistakes, publicly humiliating her by canceling her wedding was cruel revenge that went way too far. Sarah's family is furious with me. Her mother called me saying I'd always been jealous of Sarah and had finally found a way to destroy her happiness. Her sister posted on social media about toxic people who can't let go of grudges, and several people who know the situation have commented agreeing it was obviously about me. Many of our mutual friends have taken Sarah's side. They say yes, Sarah was cheating, but I only told Ryan to hurt Sarah, not to help Ryan. They argue that my timing, 2 days before the wedding, proves I wanted maximum damage. They say if I genuinely cared about Ryan knowing the truth, I would have told him months ago when I found out, not waited until right before the wedding when cancellation would be most costly and embarrassing. Some friends have supported me. They point out Sarah was actively deceiving Ryan, and he had a right to know before legally binding himself to her. They say the timing was awkward, but there's never a good time to reveal infidelity, and better before marriage than after. They note that I provided evidence and let Ryan make his own decision, rather than trying to manipulate the situation. My sister thinks I'm TA. She says my motivation was clearly revenge. Sarah had hurt me by dating Tom, and I'd been waiting for an opportunity to hurt her back. She argues that I don't even know Ryan and wasn't concerned about his well-being. I just wanted to destroy Sarah's wedding. She says if I'd wanted to do the right thing, I would have told Ryan immediately upon learning about the affair, rather than sitting on the information for 2 months. My boyfriend is conflicted. He agrees Sarah deserved to face consequences for cheating, and that Ryan deserved to know the truth. But he's uncomfortable with how satisfied I seemed when the wedding was canceled. He says my anger towards Sarah is understandable, but I should examine whether I told Ryan to help him or to hurt Sarah. Honestly, I'm not sure of my own motivations anymore. I do think Ryan deserved to know. Nobody should marry someone who's actively cheating on them. But I can't deny I felt satisfaction when the wedding was canceled. After Sarah betrayed our friendship and then painted me as the villain to her new social circle, watching her face consequences felt like justice. But was it justice or revenge? The outcome was the same. Ryan learned the truth and made an informed decision. Does my motivation matter if the action itself was providing truthful information to someone who deserved it? Am I the for telling Ryan about Sarah's affair? Or was I justified in ensuring he didn't marry someone who was cheating on him? Update. Responses are mixed but leaning toward ESH, Sarah for cheating, me for the suspicious timing and potentially revenge-driven motivation. Ryan has reached out to thank me. He said he's devastated but grateful he learned the truth before marriage rather than after. He confirmed he'd had no idea about Sarah's affair with Tom and said the wedding cancellation was embarrassing but nothing compared to being legally bound to someone who'd betray him so completely. He asked why I'd waited 2 months to tell him, which I couldn't answer honestly. Sarah has apparently had a breakdown. According to mutual friends, she's lost her job. She worked at her father's company and he fired her in his anger about the canceled wedding. Her apartment, she'd been living with Ryan and planning to move into his house after the wedding, and most of her friend group. She's moved back with her parents and is in therapy. My ex, Tom, has been gleefully stirring the pot, apparently telling people that he and Sarah are back together now that her engagement is over. Sarah has publicly denied this and called him a liar, but the drama has made everything worse for her reputation. The financial damage to Sarah and her family is significant. They'd spent over $50,000 on the wedding. Venue, catering, flowers, photographer, everything. Most deposits were non-refundable. Sarah's father is apparently threatening to sue me for intentional interference with business relations or something, though my attorney says he has no case. Several people who initially defended me have changed their positions after seeing the extent of Sarah's downfall. They say yes, she was wrong to cheat, but I've essentially destroyed her entire life. They argue that natural consequences of infidelity would have been Ryan discovering the affair on his own, or Sarah's guilt catching up with her, not me weaponizing the information at the worst possible moment. My sister has stopped speaking to me. She says she's embarrassed to be related to someone who'd be so vindictive and cruel. She thinks I'm a mean girl who disguised revenge as doing the right thing and won't admit that hurting Sarah was always the goal. My boyfriend has become increasingly distant. He says he's realized I'm capable of calculated cruelty that scares him. He's questioning whether I'd do something similar to him if we ever had problems in our relationship. We're on a break while he decides if he wants to continue dating me. Reflecting honestly, I do think Ryan deserved to know about the affair, but I can't deny the timing was strategic. I sat on the information for 2 months and told Ryan right before the wedding because I knew that timing would cause maximum disruption. If my only motivation had been Ryan's well-being, I would have told him immediately upon learning about the affair. So yes, I wanted to help Ryan avoid a bad marriage. But I also wanted Sarah to face consequences for how she'd treated me and for her pattern of betrayal. Both things can be true, but the revenge motivation probably makes me TA, even if the action itself was defensible. I'm paying a price too. Lost friendships, damaged relationship with my sister, potential end of my romantic relationship, reputation in our community as someone vindictive and cruel. I tell myself it was worth it to save Ryan from marrying a cheater, but mostly, I just feel empty. Reddit says ESH, and I'm starting to agree. Sarah absolutely shouldn't have been cheating, but I absolutely used that information as a weapon at the most damaging possible moment. We're both assholes, just in different ways. I destroyed my ex-fiancé's wedding after he left me for my cousin at our rehearsal dinner. Last year, I, 27, was engaged to Michael, 29. We'd been together for 5 years and I genuinely thought he was the one. We had our whole wedding planned for October. Venue booked, dress bought, invitations sent. My cousin Rachel, 25, was supposed to be one of my bridesmaids. We'd grown up together and I trusted her completely. The night of our rehearsal dinner, I was running late because the florist needed to confirm some last-minute changes. I told Michael to start without me, and I'd be there in 20 minutes. When I arrived at the restaurant, I found the private room we'd reserved completely empty, except for my parents and Michael's best man. Everyone else had left. My mom looked like she'd been crying. She told me Michael had made an announcement right after I'd left to handle the florist situation. He said he couldn't go through with the wedding because he'd fallen in love with someone else. Then Rachel stood up and they announced they'd been seeing each other for 6 months. They left the rehearsal dinner together, while everyone sat there in shock. 6 months. He'd been cheating on me for half a year with my own cousin while we planned our wedding. While I was picking out centerpieces and arguing with caterers about menu options, Rachel had come to my dress fittings. She'd thrown me a bridal shower. The whole time, she was sleeping with my fiancé. I called Michael that night, and he actually answered. He said he was sorry, but he couldn't marry me when his heart belonged to Rachel. He said they'd tried to fight their feelings, but love won out. Love. Like this was some romantic story instead of a betrayal. I asked if he planned to reimburse me for any of the wedding costs, since he decided to blow everything up 12 hours before the ceremony. He said that wasn't his problem and hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there thinking about how humiliated I was, how everyone at that dinner now pitied me. Then I remembered something. Michael had a secret he'd been terrified of anyone finding out. Back in college, he'd been caught cheating on a major exam. He didn't get expelled because his parents donated a building to the university, but it was kept quiet. He'd always been paranoid about it affecting his career since he worked in finance where reputation was everything. He'd made me promise years ago to never tell anyone. I also knew Rachel's biggest insecurity. She'd had a cosmetic procedure done last year that she'd lied to everyone about, told the family it was natural weight loss and good skin care, but she'd actually gotten work done and was terrified of people knowing. She'd confided in me because we were supposedly so close. Over the next 2 months, I watched their relationship play out on social media. They posted constant couple photos, acting like they were some great love story. My family was divided. Half refused to speak to Rachel. The other half said I needed to move on and be happy for them. Be happy for them. They announced their engagement on New Year's Eve, exactly 2 months after destroying my wedding. That's when I decided I was done being the graceful ex-fiancé. I started with Michael's job. His firm was very particular about ethics and integrity. I created an anonymous email account and sent his HR department a detailed letter about his academic dishonesty, including dates and specifics only someone close to him would know. I mentioned how concerning it was that someone willing to cheat in college was handling people's investments and financial planning. For Rachel, I went to a family gathering she was attending and casually mentioned to our grandmother, the biggest gossip in the family, that I'd found Rachel's cosmetic surgery receipts mixed in with some old photos she'd left at my place. I made sure to say it loud enough for others to hear. Within hours, the entire extended family knew the truth about her procedures. But I wasn't done. They'd both posted so much about their engagement online, acting like victims of circumstance who'd found true love. I made a burner account and commented on one of Rachel's posts with the full timeline. How they'd started their affair 6 months before my wedding. How Michael announced it at my rehearsal dinner. How Rachel had been my bridesmaid while sleeping with my fiancé. I included screenshots of old texts where Rachel had helped me plan wedding details, just to show how calculated it all was. The post went semi-viral in our social circles. People who'd been sympathetic to their love story turned on them quickly. Rachel's comments got flooded with people calling her shameless. Several mutual friends unfollowed both of them. Michael got called into a meeting at work. They didn't fire him over the college cheating revelation, but he got passed over for a major promotion he'd been guaranteed. His boss apparently told him they needed people with unquestionable integrity for senior positions. Rachel had a breakdown at a family dinner when everyone kept making pointed comments about authenticity and honesty. Last week, I heard through mutual friends that they postponed their wedding indefinitely. Apparently, the stress of everyone judging them was too much. Michael's bitter because his career trajectory got derailed. Rachel's not speaking to half the family. They're fighting constantly, and some people think they might not make it. My best friend says I'm iconic, and they deserved everything they got. My brother thinks I should have just cut them off and moved on with my life. He says what I did was calculated and cruel, that I've become obsessed with revenge instead of healing. My therapist suggested I might want to examine why I needed to hurt them instead of focusing on my own recovery. The thing is, I don't feel guilty. Maybe I should, but I don't. They humiliated me in front of everyone I loved at what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. They got to walk away and play the star-crossed lovers while I dealt with canceled vendors and pitying looks from relatives. Why should they get a happy ending when they destroyed mine? But now I'm wondering if I actually feel better or if I just feel empty. The revenge didn't fix the hurt. I'm still dealing with trust issues and I haven't dated anyone since. Sometimes I think about Michael losing that promotion and Rachel crying at family dinners, and I feel satisfied. Other times I wonder if I've become the villain in my own story. Should I have just let karma handle it instead of orchestrating their downfall? I destroyed my roommate's streaming career after she used my assault story for content. Living with Becca, 25, seemed perfect at first. I'm 26 and we met through a roommate finder app last year. She was friendly, clean, paid rent on time. She mentioned she did some streaming on Twitch, but I didn't think much of it. I'm not really into that world. What I didn't know was that Becca had a fairly large following, about 50,000 subscribers. She streamed daily, mostly gaming content and chatting with her audience. Her whole brand was being relatable and authentic, sharing personal stories and giving advice. Her fans were really devoted to her. 6 months into living together, something happened to me at a party. I was assaulted by someone I thought was a friend. It was traumatic, and I only told a few people, including Becca. She seemed really supportive, let me talk through it, even helped me find resources for counseling. I was grateful to have her as a roommate during that time. About a month after I told her, I came home early from work one day and heard Becca streaming in her room. Her door wasn't fully closed, and I could hear her talking to her chat. She was telling them about a friend who'd nearly been assaulted at a party. She didn't use my name, but she was giving details. Specific details that were clearly my story. I stood in the hallway listening as she described what happened to me, how I'd confided in her, how she'd been supporting me through my trauma. Her chat was going crazy with supportive messages and donations. People were sending her money, thanking her for being such a good friend and raising awareness. She was crying on camera, talking about how hard it had been to watch me suffer. She was monetizing my assault, using my trauma to create emotional content for her followers while donations rolled in. I felt sick. I recorded what I could hear through her door on my phone. Then I went to my room and started watching her past streams. I found 3 other streams where she'd talked about my assault, each time getting thousands of views and hundreds in donations. She'd created a whole narrative about being the supportive friend helping someone through crisis, and her audience loved her for it. I confronted her that night. She got defensive immediately, said she was raising awareness about assault, and that I should be grateful she was using her platform for good. I told her she'd shared my private trauma without permission and was literally profiting from it. She said she hadn't used my name, so it wasn't a violation of my privacy. She actually seemed annoyed that I was upset, like I was being ungrateful for the awareness she was spreading. I told her to take down the videos and never mention my story again. She refused, said her content was protected speech and I couldn't control what she talked about on her own channel. She said if I was so concerned about privacy, maybe I shouldn't have told her anything personal in the first place. That's when I decided to make her understand consequences. First, I clipped every single stream where she'd discussed my assault. I compiled them into one video showing how she'd told my story multiple times, how much money she'd received in donations during those streams, and how she'd built her supportive friend persona off my trauma. I calculated that she'd made roughly $4,000 in donations across those streams alone. Then, I created a Twitter account and posted the compilation video. I explained that I was the roommate she'd been talking about, that she'd never asked my permission to share my story publicly, and that she was profiting from my trauma. I didn't share my identity beyond saying I was her roommate, but I made it very clear that Becca had violated someone's trust for content. The video went viral in the streaming community. People were outraged. Other streamers called her out for exploitation. Her comment sections flooded with people demanding she apologize and donate the money she'd made from those streams. Major drama channels covered the story. Her subscriber count started dropping fast. Becca tried to do damage control. She posted an apology saying she'd made a mistake and hadn't realized how her actions affected me. She offered to donate the money to assault survivor organizations, but people weren't buying it, especially after clips surfaced of her laughing about drama in other streams and talking about how easy it was to get donations with emotional content. Her sponsors dropped her. She'd had partnerships with a gaming chair company and an energy drink brand, Both pulled out citing her exploitative behavior. Other streamers who'd collaborated with her distanced themselves publicly. Her subscriber count dropped from 50,000 to 30,000 in 2 weeks. Becca was a mess. She stopped streaming entirely. She'd quit her part-time job months ago to stream full-time, so suddenly she had no income. She couldn't pay her half of the rent. She begged me to post something defending her, saying I'd forgiven her, and it was all a misunderstanding. I refused. She moved out 3 weeks ago, had to move back in with her parents in another state. Her streaming career is essentially over. The drama followed her so thoroughly that even if she tried to rebrand, people would recognize her. She sent me a long message saying I'd destroyed her life over a mistake, that she'd genuinely been trying to help by raising awareness, and that I'd taken away everything she'd worked for. My therapist says what Becca did was a massive violation, and that I had every right to expose it. My sister thinks I went too far by making it public instead of handling it privately. She points out that I could have threatened to expose Becca first, given her a chance to make it right before nuking her career. Some people online have called me a hero for standing up against exploitative content creators. Others think I was too harsh, and that Becca's apology and offer to donate the money should have been enough. A few even suggested I was clout chasing by making my own video about it. The truth is, I wanted to destroy her platform. I wasn't just trying to get her to take down the videos, I wanted to make sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. I wanted her to lose the audience that had rewarded her for exploiting my trauma. But I also know that streaming was her career and her income, and I took that away completely. Becca's apparently working retail now and struggling financially. Her parents are supporting her while she figures out what to do next. Part of me feels vindicated that she faced real consequences. Another part wonders if I ruined her life disproportionately to what she did to me. Was I justified in exposing her publicly and destroying her career? Or should I have given her a chance to fix it privately first? I exposed my brother's fake charity after he used our dead parents' names to scam people. My brother Tyler, 32, and I, 29, lost both our parents in a car accident 4 years ago. It destroyed us. They were good people who spent their lives volunteering at food banks and homeless shelters. After they died, Tyler said he wanted to honor their legacy by starting a nonprofit in their names. He called it the Anderson Family Foundation. I thought it was a beautiful idea. Tyler asked me to help with the initial setup since I work in accounting. I helped him file the paperwork and set up the bank accounts. He said he wanted to focus on providing meals to homeless communities, just like our parents did. I contributed $5,000 from my savings to get it started. So did our aunt, our cousin, and several of our parents' old friends. Within 6 months, Tyler had raised almost $40,000. He posted constantly on social media about the foundation. Pictures of him at soup kitchens, stories about people he'd helped, updates about meal distributions. Everyone in our family was so proud. He'd quit his job to run the foundation full-time, and I remember thinking how amazing it was that something good came from our tragedy. Then, 3 months ago, I ran into Margaret, who used to volunteer with our parents. She asked me how the foundation was going and mentioned she hadn't seen Tyler at any of the usual distribution sites. I told her he'd been working with different locations. She looked confused and said she'd checked with coordinators at every shelter in the area, and nobody had heard of the Anderson Family Foundation. I didn't want to believe her. I went home and started digging through the foundation's social media. I reverse image searched some of Tyler's photos. Half of them were stock photos from volunteer websites. The others were old pictures from when our parents were alive, cropped to look recent. My stomach dropped. I logged into the foundation's bank account, which I still had access to from when I helped him set it up. He'd spent almost all of it. Rent for a luxury apartment, car payments on a BMW, bottles of expensive whiskey, vacation to Miami. There were maybe $300 in actual charitable donations to a food bank, probably just to make the records look legitimate. Everything else was personal expenses. He'd been using our dead parents' memory to fund his lifestyle while pretending to help people. I confronted him that night. Showed up at his apartment, the one he was paying for with charity money. He tried to lie at first, said he was using the money for operational costs and that non-profit work required certain expenses. I told him I'd seen the bank statements. That's when he changed tactics. He broke down crying, saying he was depressed after losing our parents and made bad choices. He promised he'd pay it all back, begged me not to tell anyone because it would destroy him. Part of me wanted to believe him. He's my brother. But I kept thinking about our aunt who donated money she didn't really have, about our parents' friends who contributed because they trusted our family, about all the people who shared his posts, thinking they were supporting something real. I gave him 1 week to come clean to everyone and return the money. He said he would. That week came and went. He posted another fundraising appeal instead, this time asking for donations to expand the foundation's reach. That's when I knew he wasn't going to stop. So, I compiled everything. Bank statements, reverse image search results, receipts for his personal purchases. I created a detailed document showing exactly where every dollar went. Then, I sent it to everyone who donated. Our family, our parents' friends, everyone I could find who'd contributed. I also sent it to the local news station that had done a puff piece about him 6 months earlier. The fallout was immediate. Our aunt called him screaming. Our cousin threatened legal action. The news station ran a follow-up story about charity fraud. Tyler's social media got flooded with angry comments before he deleted everything. He called me at 2 a.m, absolutely furious, saying I'd ruined his life over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Like stealing $40,000 in our dead parents' names was just an honest mistake. Our extended family is completely divided now. Half think I did the right thing by exposing him. The other half thinks I should have handled it privately, that I've destroyed our family by airing this publicly. My uncle won't speak to me because he thinks I was too harsh. Tyler's apparently telling people I was jealous of the attention he was getting and made everything up. Some donors are pursuing legal action against him. He might face actual criminal charges for fraud. My aunt got her money back, but others probably won't. Tyler had to move back in with our uncle because he can't afford his apartment anymore. He's not speaking to me at all. I keep wondering if I should have given him more time or tried harder to work it out privately. Maybe I could have forced him to pay everyone back quietly without destroying his reputation. But then, I think about him posting that new fundraising appeal after promising to come clean, and I don't know what else I could have done. He wasn't going to stop on his own. Was I wrong to expose him publicly instead of keeping it in the family? I exposed my influencer sister's fake lifestyle after she abandoned our sick mother for content. Growing up with my sister Brianna, 28, was complicated. I'm 25 and we were never particularly close, but things got worse when she became an Instagram influencer 3 years ago. She built this whole persona around luxury travel, wellness, and family values. Her account exploded to over 500,000 followers. She got sponsorship deals, brand partnerships, the whole thing. Our parents were proud even though I found it all pretty superficial. Our mom got diagnosed with early onset dementia 2 years ago at only 58. It progressed faster than anyone expected. By last year, she needed constant care and couldn't live alone anymore. Dad had passed away when we were kids, so it was just Brianna and me to figure out Mom's care. We agreed to split responsibilities and costs for a good memory care facility near where I live. Brianna paid her half for exactly 3 months. Then, the payments stopped. When I called her about it, she said she was having cash flow issues and needed to prioritize her business expenses. Her business expenses apparently included a trip to Bali that she posted about extensively. I ended up covering her share, draining my savings because I wasn't going to let our mom suffer in a cheaper facility. Brianna rarely visited Mom, maybe once every 2 months, despite living only an hour away. But she'd post throwback photos of them together with captions about cherishing family and how her mom was her inspiration. Her followers would comment about how sweet and devoted she was. It made me physically sick, watching her monetize a relationship she'd essentially abandoned. The breaking point came 6 months ago. Mom had a bad episode and the facility called me at 2 a.m., saying she'd become aggressive and confused. I rushed over and spent the whole night with her. I called Brianna the next morning asking if she could come stay with Mom that afternoon so I could get a few hours of sleep before my shift at the hospital, where I work as a nurse. She said she couldn't because she had a sponsored post deadline for a wellness brand. I started documenting everything. Every missed visit, every unpaid bill, every time she posted about family values while ignoring our actual family. I created a detailed timeline showing the gap between her online persona and reality. I collected screenshots of her travel posts from times when I'd begged her to help with Mom. I gathered receipts showing I'd paid for Mom's care almost entirely on my own for over a year. Then, I made a decision. I created a separate Instagram account and posted everything. I titled it, "The Real Story Behind Family Influencer Brianna Morrison," and laid out exactly how she'd abandoned our mother with dementia while using her image for content and profit. I included the financial records, showing she'd stopped contributing to care costs, screenshots of messages where I'd begged for help that she'd ignored, and photos comparing her luxury vacation posts to the dates I'd been alone dealing with Mom's medical crises. I tagged her main account and used hashtags her followers commonly searched. The post went viral within hours. Her followers were shocked and angry. Comments flooded in calling her a fraud and a terrible daughter. Other influencers started distancing themselves from her. Her engagement dropped dramatically as people unfollowed in droves. Brianna's sponsors started pulling out. Within 2 weeks, she'd lost 3 major brand deals worth a combined 6 figures, according to what she told our aunt. Smaller brands who'd been working with her dropped her too, citing brand image concerns. Her influencer friends stopped collaborating with her because association became toxic. The story got picked up by influencer drama accounts and even some mainstream media outlets covering the dark side of social media authenticity. Brianna became a cautionary tale about fake influencers. Her follower count dropped from 520,000 to under 200,000. Her career essentially imploded. Brianna showed up at my apartment 2 weeks after my post went viral. She was hysterical, crying and screaming that I'd destroyed her life and her career. She said she'd built everything from nothing, and I'd torn it down in one night out of jealousy. She claimed she'd planned to get back on track with helping Mom once her financial situation stabilized. She said I'd been cruel and vindictive by airing our private family business publicly instead of talking to her first. I told her I'd asked for help dozens of times, and she'd chosen content creation over our dying mother. She said that wasn't fair, that her job required maintaining her brand, and that missing a few visits didn't mean she didn't love Mom. A few visits. Our mother didn't even remember who we were anymore, and Brianna had seen her maybe 8 times in the past year. Our aunt called me furious. She said yes, Brianna had been irresponsible, but I'd humiliated her publicly and destroyed her livelihood. She pointed out that Brianna had been making good money that could have eventually gone to better care for Mom, and now she's unemployed and broke. She said I'd cut off my nose to spite my face by ensuring Brianna couldn't contribute financially even if she wanted to. My cousin, who's also an influencer, said what I did was cruel, and that I didn't understand the pressure of maintaining an online presence. She said Brianna's mental health had been suffering, and I'd made it worse by publicly destroying her. She suggested I was jealous of Brianna's success and used Mom as an excuse to tear her down. Some of Brianna's former followers actually reached out to me, thanking me for exposing the truth. They said they'd been inspired by her family content and felt betrayed learning it was all fake. But others said I'd been vindictive and should have handled it privately, that public humiliation wasn't the answer. Mom's doctor told me stress wasn't good for anyone, and asked if the family drama could be set aside for Mom's sake. My boyfriend thinks I was completely justified, but wishes I'd talked to him before posting, because now we're dealing with harassment from Brianna's remaining loyal fans who found my personal information. The truth is, I wanted to destroy Brianna's influencer career. I wasn't just trying to get help with Mom or expose hypocrisy. I wanted her punished for abandoning our mother, and I wanted it to hurt. I wanted her followers to know she was a fraud, and I wanted her sponsors to drop her. I achieved exactly what I set out to do, but now Brianna's struggling to find any work. Her reputation is permanently damaged, and she's definitely not contributing to Mom's care anymore. She had to move into a cheaper apartment and is apparently dealing with severe anxiety and depression. Part of me feels vindicated. Another part wonders if I destroyed my sister's life over something I could have addressed differently. My therapist asked if the public exposure actually helped Mom or just satisfied my anger. Honestly, it didn't help Mom at all. It just made me feel like Brianna finally faced consequences for her selfishness. Should I have tried to resolve this privately? Or was public exposure the only way to hold her accountable for abandoning our mother? I exposed my therapist's affair after she started dating my ex-husband behind my back. 2 years ago, I, 34, went through a devastating divorce from my husband Marcus, 36. He'd had an affair with a coworker, and I was completely blindsided. The betrayal destroyed me. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Linda Hayes, 39, to help me process everything. She was amazing, helped me work through the anger and grief, and I genuinely trusted her. I saw Dr. Hayes for about 8 months, weekly sessions where I poured out everything about my marriage, the affair, my feelings about Marcus. She knew details about him I'd never told anyone else. His insecurities, his patterns, even what he was like in bed. She knew I still had complicated feelings about him despite the divorce. She helped me navigate co-parenting our 6-year-old daughter, Emma. I stopped therapy about a year ago when I felt like I'd made enough progress. Dr. Hayes and I had a final session where she congratulated me on my growth. I thanked her for changing my life. It felt like a really positive ending. Last month, I dropped Emma off at Marcus's place for his weekend. I saw a car in his driveway I didn't recognize. When Marcus answered the door, I caught a glimpse of someone in his kitchen. I didn't think much of it until Emma came home Sunday night and mentioned that Daddy's girlfriend Linda had made them pancakes. Linda. I asked Emma what Linda looked like, and my stomach dropped. It was Dr. Hayes. I looked her up on social media and found nothing, but then I remembered Marcus's Instagram. There she was in recent photos at a restaurant with him, at a park with Emma, at his place. They'd apparently been dating for at least 4 months based on the posts. 4 months. While I was still occasionally texting Dr. Hayes for recommendations on parenting books and coping strategies, she was sleeping with my ex-husband, the man whose affair had sent me to therapy in the first place. I felt physically ill. This woman had sat across from me for 8 months, listened to my most vulnerable moments, knew every intimate detail about my marriage and my ex-husband, and then decided to date him. She'd met him through me, there was no other connection. She had to have recognized his name, his details, everything. This wasn't a coincidence. I called her office and asked to schedule an appointment. The receptionist said Dr. Hayes wasn't taking new clients, but could refer me to someone else. I said I was a former client and needed to discuss something urgent. She squeezed me in 2 days later. I walked into that office and watched Dr. Hayes's face go white when she saw me. She knew exactly why I was there. I asked her directly if she was dating Marcus. She tried to maintain professional composure and said she couldn't discuss her personal life with former clients. I told her I already knew, that Emma had mentioned her, and that I'd seen the photos. Dr. Hayes got defensive. She said our therapeutic relationship had ended a year ago, and what she did in her private life was none of my business. She claimed she'd met Marcus independently and didn't realize who he was at first. I called her a liar. She knew every detail about him from our sessions. She'd pursued my ex-husband using information I'd given her in confidence. She asked me to leave. I did, but I wasn't done, not even close. I filed a formal complaint with the state licensing board. I detailed our therapeutic relationship, provided dates of our sessions, and explained that she was now in a romantic relationship with my ex-husband, whom she'd only known about through my therapy. I included screenshots from Marcus's social media showing them together. Then I left reviews. On every platform her practice was listed, I wrote detailed accounts of what happened. I didn't violate any confidentiality, I just stated facts. That she'd used information from our sessions to pursue a relationship with my ex-husband, that she'd violated the trust fundamental to therapy, that she'd crossed ethical boundaries that made her unfit to practice. I also contacted Marcus, told him I'd filed a complaint, and that what Dr. Hayes had done was a serious ethical violation. He got angry, said I was trying to ruin his relationship because I was jealous. He claimed Dr. Hayes had told him they'd met through a mutual friend, not through me. I told him to ask her directly if she'd ever been my therapist and watch her reaction. The licensing board launched an investigation. I had to provide detailed statements and documentation. Dr. Hayes' attorney sent me a cease and desist letter, demanding I remove the reviews, claiming they were defamatory. I refused. Everything I'd written was true. Marcus called me 3 weeks later. He'd confronted Dr. Hayes about being my therapist, and she'd finally admitted it. He was furious that she'd lied to him about how they met. They'd broken up. He said I'd gotten what I wanted and destroyed something good out of spite. But the fallout kept going. The licensing board found that Dr. Hayes had violated ethical standards by pursuing a relationship with a former client's ex-spouse, especially one she'd only known about through therapy sessions. They suspended her license for 6 months and required additional ethics training. Her practice basically collapsed. Most of her clients left after the reviews, and the licensing issues became public record. Dr. Hayes showed up at my house last week. She was crying, said I'd destroyed her career and her relationship over something that wasn't even illegal. She said the therapeutic relationship had ended, and she'd fallen in love with Marcus genuinely. She called me vindictive and said I couldn't handle seeing my ex-husband happy with someone else. My best friend thinks Dr. Hayes deserved everything she got for such a massive breach of trust. My brother thinks I went overboard with the reviews and that the licensing complaint would have been enough. He says I wanted to destroy her professionally because I was hurt personally. My mom pointed out that Emma had been getting attached to Dr. Hayes, and now she's dealing with another loss because they broke up. Marcus is bitter, and it's making co-parenting harder. He's threatening to pursue a custody modification, claiming I'm unstable and vindictive. I keep telling myself Dr. Hayes crossed a line that therapists should never cross. She used privileged information to pursue a relationship with my ex-husband. But I also know the reviews were designed to destroy her reputation beyond just reporting her to the board. I wanted other people to know what she'd done. I wanted her to lose clients. I wanted her to feel as betrayed as I felt. The 6-month suspension will end eventually, and she can rebuild her practice. But her reputation in this city is permanently damaged. Some people think I did a public service by warning others. Others think I weaponized the licensing board to punish her for dating my ex. Should I have stopped at the licensing complaint? Or was I right to make sure everyone knew what kind of therapist she really was? I got my childhood bully fired after she became my subordinate and started harassing me again. Growing up, I, 30 family, was relentlessly bullied by a girl named Jessica, also 30 family. We're talking middle school through high school, 6 years of constant harassment. She made my life miserable, spread rumors, destroyed my belongings, got other kids to exclude me from everything. I switched schools senior year just to escape her. It left me with anxiety issues I still deal with today. I moved across the country for college and built a completely different life. Got therapy, found confidence, worked my way up in marketing. I'm now a director at a mid-size firm, managing a team of 8 people. I love my job, and I'm genuinely good at it. 2 months ago, HR told me we were hiring a new marketing coordinator to join my team. I reviewed resumes and sat in on interviews, but didn't recognize any candidates. We made an offer to someone, and I didn't think much of it until her first day. Jessica walked into the office for orientation. I literally froze when I saw her. She recognized me immediately, and her face went pale. During the team introduction, she acted overly friendly, saying we went to school together and what a small world it was. I stayed professional, but inside I was panicking. I told myself it would be fine. We were adults now. That was 15 years ago. People change. For the first week, Jessica seemed normal. Quiet, did her work, nothing unusual. I started to relax. Then, little things started happening. Comments in team meetings that seemed innocuous to everyone else, but felt pointed to me. She'd volunteer me for extra work in front of senior leadership, started befriending other team members, and I'd hear them laughing, then going quiet when I walked by. It felt like high school all over again. The breaking point came during a presentation to executives. I'd worked on a campaign strategy for weeks. Right before I was supposed to present, Jessica spoke up and said she'd noticed some errors in my data analysis. She hadn't mentioned anything to me privately beforehand. She made me look incompetent in front of people who determine my promotions. I pulled her aside after and asked what was going on. She smirked and said, maybe I should double-check my work better. That smirk. It was the exact same expression she used to give me in high school when she'd done something cruel and knew she'd get away with it. That's when I realized this wasn't coincidence. She was doing this deliberately. I started documenting everything. Every subtle dig, every time she undermined me, every instance of her spreading information to my team that made me look bad. I kept detailed notes with dates and witnesses. I also started going through her actual work product more carefully. Turns out, Jessica wasn't nearly as good at her job as she was at office politics. She was missing deadlines, making sloppy errors, and covering it up by being charming to everyone else. I found emails where she'd blamed her mistakes on technical issues or implied other team members had dropped the ball. None of it was true. I also discovered something interesting in her employment file that HR had shared with me as her manager. She'd lied on her resume. She claimed to have a degree from a university she'd never actually graduated from. She'd attended for 3 years but never finished. I verified it through the university's registrar when I called them pretending to be conducting a background check. That lie alone was grounds for termination according to our company policy. But I didn't go to HR immediately. I waited and watched and documented everything for another month. I wanted an airtight case because I knew if I accused her of anything, she'd flip it and make me look like the vindictive ex-classmate with a grudge. During that month, Jessica got bolder. She started CCing senior leadership on emails highlighting my supposed mistakes. She volunteered to take over one of my key accounts, suggesting to our VP that I seemed overwhelmed. She befriended my team members, and I overheard her making comments about my management style, planting seeds of doubt about my competence. Finally, I compiled everything: the resume fraud, the documented pattern of undermining behavior, the work quality issues, the instances of her blaming others for her mistakes. I presented it all to HR and my VP in a 2-hour meeting. I kept my emotions completely out of it, just presented facts and documentation. HR launched an investigation immediately. They verified the degree fraud within 2 days. They interviewed team members about the workplace behavior, and several people confirmed they'd felt pressured by Jessica to take sides or had witnessed her making inappropriate comments about my leadership. Jessica was fired within a week, escorted out by security with no advance warning, standard procedure for resume fraud. She tried to claim I'd fabricated everything because of a personal vendetta from high school. HR told her the degree verification came directly from the university, and multiple employees had corroborated the workplace issues. Her firing stood. She called me that night crying, begging me to tell HR it was a misunderstanding, that she'd made a mistake on her resume years ago and forgot to correct it. She said she had rent to pay and no other job prospects. She accused me of ruining her life over high school bullying that happened when we were kids. Said I should have been the bigger person and just transferred her to another department instead of getting her fired. I didn't respond. I blocked her number, but her words stuck with me. My best friend says Jessica brought this entirely on herself by lying on her resume and harassing me at work. My sister thinks I could have handled it differently, maybe just addressed the behavior issues without digging into her background for ammunition. She thinks I was looking for a reason to destroy Jessica because of our history. The truth is, I don't know if I would have looked so carefully at Jessica's resume and work quality if she'd been anyone else. Maybe I would have been more lenient about small mistakes, or given more coaching on the interpersonal issues. But she wasn't anyone else. She was the person who made my teenage years hell, and she was doing it again. My team seems relieved she's gone, which makes me think her behavior was affecting more people than just me. But I also know I went into that investigation determined to find something fireable. The resume fraud was real. The work issues were real. But would I have pursued it all so aggressively if it had been someone I didn't have history with? Part of me feels vindicated. The girl who tortured me for years finally faced real consequences. But another part of me wonders if I used my position of power to settle an old score under the guise of professional concerns. I had legitimate reasons to fire her, but were those reasons why I did it? Or just the justification? Should I have recused myself from managing her given our history? Or was I right to document and report her behavior regardless of our past? I got my landlord evicted from his own building after he tried to force me out illegally. For the past 3 years, I, 26, have been renting a studio apartment in a building owned by Greg, 45. When I first moved in, everything seemed fine. Rent was reasonable, the place was decent, and Greg mostly kept to himself in the unit directly above mine. He lived there with his teenage son and managed the building himself. Things changed about 8 months ago when a luxury condo development started going up 2 blocks away. Suddenly my neighborhood was getting trendy. New coffee shops, restaurants, all that stuff. I noticed other tenants in my building getting buyout offers from Greg. He wanted to renovate and flip the units for way higher rent. Most people took the money and left. I didn't want to leave. My rent was $800 a month in a city where studios go for $1,500 minimum now. Plus, I liked my neighborhood before it got gentrified. I told Greg I wasn't interested in his buyout offer. He seemed annoyed but said, "Okay." Then the harassment started. First it was small things. He'd schedule building maintenance during my work-from-home hours, always making tons of noise right above my unit. Then my packages started disappearing. My internet got disconnected twice because he claimed I hadn't paid utilities, even though I had proof of payment. He'd text me at midnight about lease violations I wasn't committing. The final straw came 2 months ago. I came home to find my locks changed. My key didn't work. Greg was standing in the hallway and told me I'd been evicted for violating my lease by having unauthorized occupants. I live alone. I've always lived alone. I told him this was illegal, and he couldn't just lock me out without going through proper eviction procedures. He said I could either take a buyout offer right now or deal with the court system while my stuff stayed locked inside. I should mention that I'm a paralegal. I know exactly how tenant law works in my state. I called the police immediately. They made Greg let me back into my apartment and told him he couldn't do self-help evictions. Greg was furious but had to comply. That night I started documenting everything. Every text message, every bogus utility claim, every noise complaint. I also started researching Greg's building permits and rental licenses. Turns out Greg had some interesting violations of his own. His building was registered as a 4-unit property, but he'd illegally converted the basement into a 5th rental unit 3 years ago without permits. He'd been collecting rent on it the whole time. The unit didn't meet code requirements for ceiling height, egress windows, or ventilation. Basically a death trap that he was charging someone $900 a month to live in. I also discovered that Greg's own unit wasn't properly registered. In our city, owner-occupied buildings with rentals need special licensing, which he didn't have. And the kicker? He owed almost $30,000 in back property taxes. He'd been paying the minimum to avoid foreclosure while collecting rent from all of us. So I filed complaints. Code enforcement for the illegal basement unit. the housing authority about his missing owner-occupied license. I sent his tax delinquency information to the city's revenue department. I even contacted his mortgage company to let them know he was renting out units in a building with unpaid property taxes, which violated his loan terms. Then, I filed a formal complaint against him with the state's Tenant Advocacy Board, including all the documentation of his harassment and the illegal lockout. Everything hit at once. Code enforcement red-tagged the basement unit and fined Greg $12,000. The tenant down there had to move out immediately, and Greg had to pay for her relocation. The housing authority suspended his rental licenses for the entire building until he could prove compliance, meaning he couldn't legally collect rent from anyone. His mortgage company started foreclosure proceedings because of the unpaid taxes and license violations. Greg showed up at my door 3 weeks ago, absolutely panicking. The bank was taking his building. He was going to lose everything, including his own home where he lived with his son. He begged me to withdraw my complaints, said he'd made mistakes but didn't deserve this. He actually cried. Said his son was going to have to change schools because they'd need to move in with his ex-wife 2 hours away. I told him he should have thought about that before he illegally locked me out of my home. He started yelling, calling me vindictive, saying I'd destroyed his life over a simple disagreement. A simple disagreement. Like trapping me outside my own apartment with all my belongings inside was just a minor misunderstanding. The foreclosure went through last week. Greg and his son moved out. A property management company bought the building at auction, and they're actually being decent landlords so far. They honored all our existing leases at current rent prices and are making real repairs. The other tenants know what I did, and most of them are grateful. But a few think I went too far. My sister says I'm ruthless and could have just moved out instead of ruining a single father's life. My best friend thinks Greg got what he deserved for being a slumlord. My parents won't give me a straight answer, but I can tell they think I was harsh. I keep thinking about Greg's son having to switch schools and leave his friends. That kid didn't do anything wrong. But I also think about how Greg was perfectly fine trying to illegally evict me and collect rent on a dangerous basement unit. He built his life on breaking the rules, and it eventually caught up with him. I just sped up the process. Did I go too far by reporting everything instead of just fighting the eviction? I got my mentor disbarred after he stole my legal strategy and humiliated me in court. Working under attorney Richard Chen, 56, was supposed to be my big break. I'm 28 and fresh out of law school, and getting hired at his firm seemed like winning the lottery. Richard had an incredible reputation in corporate litigation and promised to mentor me personally. For my first year, I assisted him on cases, did research, and learned everything I could. 8 months ago, Richard assigned me to work on a mid-sized contract dispute case. It wasn't huge, but it was complex enough that he said I could take the lead with his supervision. I spent 3 months developing our legal strategy. I found obscure case precedents from the 1980s that perfectly supported our client's position. I crafted arguments that I genuinely believed could win the case. Richard reviewed my work and seemed impressed, gave me notes but said the foundation was solid. 2 weeks before trial, Richard told me there'd been a change of plans. The client had requested he take over as lead counsel because they were nervous about having a junior attorney at trial. I was disappointed, but understood. He said I'd still second chair and participate. I'd get the experience and the credit for my research. The trial started and I quickly realized something was wrong. Richard was presenting my exact arguments, using my research, but he'd reframed everything to make it seem like his own strategy. When the judge complimented his novel approach to the precedents, Richard thanked him and talked about the hours he'd personally spent digging through old cases. He never once mentioned my contribution. We won the case. The client was thrilled, and there was even a small article in a legal journal praising Richard's brilliant strategy. My name appeared once in the piece as junior associate on the team. Richard got all the credit, the recognition, and apparently a bonus from the grateful client that he never shared. When I confronted him privately, he said, "Welcome to the legal profession." He told me that's how law firms work. Associates do the work and partners get the credit. He said I should be grateful for the learning experience and that eventually I'd be in his position. He acted like I was naive for expecting acknowledgement. Then it got worse. At the firm's monthly meeting, Richard used the case as a teaching moment. He walked everyone through the legal strategy, presenting it entirely as his own work. When another associate asked how he'd found those particular precedents, Richard made up a story about late nights in the law library and following his instincts. He turned my 3 months of work into a personal triumph story in front of the whole firm. I felt humiliated and angry, but I didn't know what to do. Richard was a named partner, and I was a first-year associate. Speaking up seemed like career suicide. Then something happened that changed everything. A paralegal named Jenny, who'd been at the firm for 12 years, pulled me aside after that meeting. She told me Richard had done this before, multiple times over the years with different junior attorneys. He'd take their best work, present it as his own, and push them out if they complained too loudly. She said she'd kept quiet because she needed the job, but watching him do it to another young attorney made her sick. Jenny had access to old files and email records. She helped me pull documentation going back 7 years, showing a pattern of Richard taking credit for associates' work. We found emails where associates had sent Richard their research and strategies, then later documents where Richard presented identical work to clients and courts without attribution. In one case, Richard had published a law review article that was almost entirely written by a former associate who'd left the firm shortly after. I also discovered something more serious. In one case from 4 years ago, Richard had submitted a brief that contained research from a junior associate. That associate had made a critical error in citing a case that had been partially overturned. Richard hadn't caught the mistake because he hadn't actually read the research carefully. He'd just taken the associate's work, put his name on it, and filed it. The error had gone unnoticed, but it was still a misrepresentation to the court. I compiled everything into a detailed complaint and filed it with the State Bar Association. I included the pattern of taking credit for others' work, the specific instance of the misrepresentation to the court, and testimony from Jenny and 2 former associates I'd tracked down who confirmed similar experiences. The bar investigation took 6 months. During that time, Richard figured out I'd filed the complaint. He called me into his office and threatened me, said I'd never work in corporate law again, that he'd make sure every firm in the state knew I was disloyal. He put me on the worst assignments, excluded me from meetings, and made my work life miserable. But the investigation kept moving forward. The bar found that Richard had systematically taken credit for associates' work, which violated ethical rules about honesty and integrity. More seriously, they found that the brief with the citation error constituted a misrepresentation to the court because Richard had signed it without properly reviewing it, then blamed the associate when it was discovered. Richard was disbarred last month. Not just suspended, but permanently disbarred. 30 years of practicing law ended because of my complaint. The decision cited both the pattern of dishonesty with associates and the misrepresentation to the court. The bar said his behavior demonstrated a lack of integrity fundamental to practicing law. The firm asked me to leave shortly after. They didn't fire me officially, but made it clear I wasn't welcome. I'm currently unemployed and finding it hard to get interviews. Richard was well connected, and word has spread that I reported him. Some attorneys see me as principled. Others see me as someone who destroyed a respected attorney's career over being upset about credit. Richard's wife called me crying. They're losing their house because his income is gone, and he's 56 years old with no way to practice law. His kids had to withdraw from private college. She said I'd destroyed their family because I was too immature to understand how law firms operate. Jenny got fired too for helping me. She can't prove it was retaliation, but the timing was obvious. She's struggling to find a new job and blames me for getting her involved. She said she wanted to help, but didn't realize I'd take it this far. 2 of the former associates I contacted thanked me for finally holding Richard accountable, but another one said I should have just left the firm instead of destroying someone's career. He said Richard's behavior was wrong, but disbarment was too extreme a punishment. My parents think I did the right thing, but wish I'd considered the consequences for myself first. My law school mentor said I'll recover professionally, but that I've made my early career much harder by getting a reputation as someone who reports senior attorneys. The thing is, I don't fully regret getting Richard disbarred. He stole my work, humiliated me, and had apparently been doing it to young attorneys for years. But I also know that the misrepresentation issue from 4 years ago wasn't really about my case. I included it because I wanted to make sure he'd face serious consequences. I weaponized someone else's mistake to strengthen my complaint. His family is suffering now. Jenny lost her job. I'm struggling professionally. And I keep wondering if I should have just found a new job and moved on instead of pursuing a complaint I knew would destroy his career. Was I right to report him, knowing it would likely end in disbarment? Or did I let my anger turn justified whistleblowing into vindictive revenge? I got my wedding photographer blacklisted after she photoshopped my wife to look thinner. Getting married to my wife Sarah, 29, last June, was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. I'm 31, and we'd been together for 6 years. Sarah is plus-sized and absolutely beautiful, and she'd spent months finding the perfect dress that made her feel confident and gorgeous. She was so excited about our wedding photos. We hired a photographer named Michelle, who came highly recommended with a strong portfolio. She was expensive, almost $3,000, but weddings are expensive, and we wanted quality photos to remember our day. During our consultation, Michelle seemed professional and enthusiastic. We went over the shot list, discussed our vision. Everything seemed perfect. The wedding itself was amazing. Michelle was there all day taking photos during the ceremony, reception, and portraits. Sarah looked stunning in her dress. I remember thinking how lucky I was watching her walk down the aisle. She was radiant and confident, and so happy. We got the photos back 6 weeks later. I opened them first while Sarah was at work because I wanted to see if they'd turned out well before showing her. What I saw made me physically ill. Michelle had photoshopped Sarah. Not just minor touch-ups that every photographer does, but major alterations. She'd made Sarah look at least 50 pounds lighter. Her face was slimmer, her arms were thinner, her waist was completely different. She'd altered my wife's entire body to fit some conventional beauty standard. These weren't photos of Sarah. They were photos of some edited version of her that didn't exist. The woman I married wasn't in these pictures. I went through all 300 photos, and Michelle had done this to every single one where Sarah was visible. Even our first kiss photo, our first dance, everything. She'd changed my wife's body in our wedding photos. I was furious, but I didn't want to show Sarah without talking to Michelle first. Maybe there was some mistake or miscommunication. I called Michelle and told her what I'd found. She seemed confused by my anger at first, then actually said she thought she was doing us a favor. She said most brides appreciate when she makes them look their best in photos, that it's part of her editing process to enhance people's appearance. I told her Sarah already looked her best, that her real body was perfect, and that I wanted unedited photos immediately. Michelle got defensive. She said Sarah had seemed self-conscious during photos, that she was just trying to give Sarah confidence when she looked back at the pictures. She actually said plus-sized brides are usually grateful for the extra editing work. I told her that was horrific and fat-phobic, and she needed to send the original unedited photos within 24 hours. She refused. She said the edited photos were her artistic vision and represented her brand. She claimed the contract we signed gave her creative control over editing choices. She offered to meet halfway and do lighter editing instead, but she wouldn't provide completely unedited photos. She said that would reflect poorly on her portfolio. I had to tell Sarah. I sat her down and explained what Michelle had done before showing her any photos. Sarah started crying before she even saw them. When I showed her the edited pictures, she completely broke down. She said she'd felt so beautiful that day, and now she couldn't even have photos that showed her real body at her own wedding. Sarah was devastated for days. She kept saying, Michelle must have thought she looked terrible to edit her that drastically. I tried to reassure her that this was about Michelle's issues, not Sarah's appearance. But the damage was done. My wife's confidence was shattered. I contacted a lawyer about the contract. Turns out Michelle was technically within her rights based on the editing clause, though our lawyer said it was morally reprehensible. We could potentially sue for emotional distress, but it would be expensive and difficult to prove damages. Michelle knew this and basically told us to take it or leave it. So I decided to destroy her business instead. I started by leaving detailed reviews on every platform where she advertised. Google, Wedding Wire, The Knot, Yelp, Facebook. I explained exactly what she'd done, posted side-by-side comparisons showing the extent of the body editing, and warned other couples, especially plus-sized brides. I made it clear this wasn't about normal photo retouching, but extreme body modification without consent. The reviews got traction fast. Other brides started commenting with similar experiences. One woman said Michelle had photoshopped her arm tattoos to be less visible without asking. Another said Michelle had lightened her skin tone in all her photos. A plus-sized bride from 2 years ago came forward, saying Michelle had done the same body editing to her, and she'd been too embarrassed to complain. Local wedding Facebook groups started sharing my reviews. Michelle's business page got flooded with comments. She tried to respond, saying she was being unfairly attacked and that artistic editing was standard in the industry. That just made more people angry. Professional photography groups weighed in, saying what she'd done was unethical. Then I contacted every wedding venue and vendor we'd worked with that day. Our florist, caterer, DJ, the venue coordinator. I told them what Michelle had done and said they should reconsider recommending her to future couples. Most of them removed her from their preferred vendor lists immediately. Several told me she'd been problematic before, but this was the final straw. Within 2 months, Michelle's business had essentially collapsed. Her website reviews were overwhelmingly negative. She'd lost all her preferred vendor relationships. Her social media following dropped dramatically. She posted a long apology on her business page, saying she'd made mistakes and would change her practices, but it was too late. The damage to her reputation was permanent. Last month, I found out Michelle shut down her photography business entirely. She's apparently working at a portrait studio in a mall now, doing basic family photos. Her wedding photography career is completely over. Sarah's mom called me saying I'd gone too far. She said Michelle made a bad choice, but I'd destroyed her entire livelihood over one mistake. She pointed out that Michelle probably has bills and maybe a family to support, and now she's lost everything. My own brother said leaving honest reviews was fine, but personally contacting all her vendor relationships to get her blacklisted was excessive and vindictive. Sarah says she's glad I stood up for her, but sometimes she seems uncomfortable with how far I took it. She mentioned that Michelle sent her a direct message apologizing and saying she'd lost her business and didn't know how she'd pay rent. Sarah felt bad enough to respond kindly, which honestly frustrated me. My best friend thinks Michelle absolutely deserved it for such a violating act. My dad says I let my anger make me cruel. He thinks the public reviews would have been enough punishment without me actively campaigning to destroy her vendor relationships. The thing is, I don't regret it. Michelle took something irreplaceable from us and showed no remorse until she faced consequences. She didn't just make a mistake. She deliberately altered my wife's body in our wedding photos and refused to fix it. She needed to understand that actions have consequences. But I also know that working at a mall portrait studio after having your own wedding photography business is a pretty devastating fall. And I'm the one who made that happen through a coordinated campaign to dismantle her professional reputation. Should I have stopped at the reviews, or was I right to make sure she couldn't hurt other couples the same way? I had my gym coach arrested after he body-shamed my daughter into an eating disorder. My daughter Emma, 14, started high school last year with so much excitement. She's always been athletic and decided to try out for the varsity volleyball team. I'm 42 and played volleyball myself growing up, so I was thrilled she wanted to follow that path. She made the team easily and was so proud. Her coach, Derek Patterson, 38, had an impressive record with multiple state championships. The first few months seemed great. Emma practiced hard and loved being part of the team. Then around November, I noticed she started eating less at dinner. She'd push food around her plate and say she wasn't hungry. By December, she was skipping meals entirely, and I found protein bar wrappers hidden in her room. When I asked what was going on, she broke down crying. She told me Coach Patterson had been making comments about girls' bodies since the season started. He'd weigh them publicly before practice and make remarks about who needed to lose weight to improve their performance. He told Emma specifically that she was getting too heavy to be an effective middle blocker, and that elite athletes needed to watch their intake. He'd started calling her thick in front of the team. Emma was 5'8" and 145 pounds, a completely healthy weight for her height and age. She wasn't overweight at all. But Coach Patterson had convinced her she needed to drop 15 pounds to be competitive. She'd developed disordered eating patterns in just 2 months because a trusted authority figure had told her she was too fat. I immediately scheduled a meeting with the athletic director and the principal. I brought Emma's pediatrician's statement confirming she was a healthy weight and documentation of how her eating had changed. I explained what Coach Patterson had been doing and demanded action. The athletic director defended him, said Coach Patterson was demanding because he wanted excellence, that elite athletics required discipline about weight and nutrition. The principal seemed concerned but said they'd need to investigate before taking action. Nothing happened. Coach Patterson kept coaching. Emma refused to quit the team because she loved volleyball, but her eating disorder got worse. By February, she'd lost 20 pounds, and her pediatrician diagnosed her with anorexia nervosa. She started therapy twice a week and saw a nutritionist. Watching my vibrant daughter become obsessed with calories and terrified of food was devastating. I went back to the school with medical documentation of Emma's eating disorder and a timeline showing it started with Coach Patterson's comments. They offered to have him attend sensitivity training. Sensitivity training. Like body-shaming teenage girls into eating disorders was just a communication problem that could be fixed with a workshop. That's when I found out I wasn't the only parent with concerns. I started reaching out to other volleyball parents and discovered 3 other girls had also developed disordered eating under Coach Patterson's coaching. One sophomore had been hospitalized for dangerously low weight. Parents had complained before, but the school always protected him because of his winning record. I decided the school wasn't going to handle this, so I went around them. I contacted every parent I could find whose daughter had been on Patterson's teams over the past 5 years. I created a private Facebook group and invited them all. 15 parents joined, and 8 of them shared stories about their daughters developing eating problems, anxiety about weight, or leaving the sport entirely because of Patterson's comments about their bodies. I compiled everything into a detailed document. Testimonies from parents, medical records where parents consented to share them, a timeline showing the pattern across multiple years. Then, I sent it to the local news station that covers high school sports. I also sent it to the State Athletic Association and filed a formal complaint about coaching misconduct. The news station ran the story. They interviewed 4 parents on camera, including me, talking about how Patterson's body shaming had harmed our daughters. The story included statements from therapists about the damage coaches can cause when they focus inappropriately on athletes' weight. It got significant local attention. The pressure worked. The school board held an emergency meeting and suspended Patterson pending investigation. The State Athletic Association launched their own inquiry. Other parents started coming forward with complaints that went beyond body shaming, including verbal abuse and creating hostile environments. The investigation found that Patterson had violated multiple policies about appropriate coaching conduct and student welfare. The district terminated his employment. He couldn't just move to another school because the Athletic Association also suspended his coaching certification for 3 years. But I wasn't satisfied with just getting him fired. I'd learned during my research that in our state, adults in positions of authority who cause psychological harm to minors through systematic abuse can face criminal charges under certain circumstances. It's rarely prosecuted, but the law exists. I filed a police report. I provided all the documentation I'd gathered, medical records showing Emma's eating disorder with professional opinions linking it to Patterson's behavior, and testimony from multiple families. I pushed the district attorney's office to consider charges. It took 8 months, but they eventually charged Patterson with multiple counts of child endangerment and psychological abuse. The prosecution argued he'd systematically created conditions that he knew or should have known would cause psychological harm to minors under his supervision. The medical evidence of eating disorders directly linked to his behavior was compelling. Patterson was convicted on 3 counts. He got 2 years in prison plus probation, and he's permanently banned from working with minors in any capacity. He's now 40 years old, with a criminal record, and his coaching career is completely destroyed. Emma's getting better. She's been in treatment for over a year and has gained back most of the weight she lost. She's playing volleyball again, but at a club not affiliated with school, where the coaching philosophy is healthier. Her therapist says she'll probably always have to be careful about disordered eating triggers, but she's making real progress. Patterson's wife divorced him while he was in prison. She has their 2 kids, and according to social media, has moved to another state. When he gets out next year, he'll have no career, no family, and a criminal record that will make it nearly impossible to find decent employment. His mother sent me a letter calling me vindictive. She said her son made mistakes, but didn't deserve to have his entire life destroyed. She said he was trying to make girls better athletes, and that I'd taken his good intentions and twisted them into something criminal. She said his kids ask about him and don't understand why Daddy is in prison. The other parents whose daughters were affected are split. Most are grateful I pushed for accountability. 2 think I went too far pursuing criminal charges. One mother told me that while Patterson hurt her daughter, she's uncomfortable with him being in prison and believes he should have just lost his job. My ex-husband thinks I became obsessed with destroying Patterson instead of focusing on Emma's recovery. He says Emma is better now, and that was the goal, not ruining someone's life. My sister says Patterson deserved to be fired, but that pursuing criminal charges was excessive and vindictive. Some people in our community see me as a crusader who protected children. Others think I'm a vengeful parent who couldn't accept that competitive athletics are tough and used my daughter's struggles to destroy a man's life. The school district settled a civil lawsuit with us and 2 other families, but that feels almost beside the point now. I genuinely believe Patterson's behavior was abusive, and he needed to face serious consequences. But I also know I pushed for criminal prosecution partly because I wanted him to suffer, the way our family suffered watching Emma struggle with anorexia. I wanted him in prison, not just unemployed. His kids are growing up without a father because of choices I made about how far to push the legal system. He'll be nearly impossible to employ when he's released, essentially ensuring lifelong consequences. And while Emma is healing, I wonder sometimes if she'd be healing just as well if I'd stopped at getting him fired instead of imprisoned. Did I go too far pushing for criminal charges? Or was that the appropriate response to someone who systematically harmed children? I outed my cousin as a scammer after she faked cancer to steal our grandmother's inheritance. My cousin Danielle, 33, and I, 29, grew up close despite our age gap. Our grandmother Eleanor raised both of us after our parents struggled with various issues. She was the glue that held our fractured family together. When she passed away 18 months ago at 84, it devastated everyone. She left behind a modest estate, about $200,000 split between me, Danielle, and our Uncle Robert. Except we never saw a penny of it. Danielle was named executor since she's the oldest grandchild, and had been handling Grandma's bills the last few years. She said the estate was complicated, that there were debts to settle, and probate was taking longer than expected. We trusted her. She was family, and she'd been closest to Grandma during her final years. Around the same time, Danielle announced she'd been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. She posted about it constantly on social media, started a GoFundMe, talked about her treatment journey. Our family rallied around her. Uncle Robert gave her money for medical expenses. I helped drive her to supposed appointments. Friends and extended family donated thousands to her fundraiser. She shaved her head, posted photos looking weak and tired, talked about the pain of chemotherapy. Everyone praised her strength and bravery. She raised almost $30,000 through the GoFundMe and direct donations from family members. Then, last month, I ran into Danielle's ex-boyfriend Mark at a coffee shop. We'd always gotten along, and he asked how Danielle's treatment was going. I said it had been rough, but she was fighting. He looked confused and said Danielle didn't have cancer. She'd told him that story during their relationship 2 years ago to manipulate him into staying when he tried to break up with her. He'd later found out she'd been lying, and that's why he left. 2 years ago, before Grandma even died, I felt my blood run cold. I started digging. I called the hospital Danielle claimed to be getting treatment at and said I needed to send flowers to their oncology patient, Danielle Morrison. They had no patient by that name. I checked her GoFundMe timeline against her social media posts and found inconsistencies. Photos she claimed were from chemo days were actually taken at a hair salon based on the background. The weakness and sickness she described didn't match someone who was posting from restaurants and bars the same evenings. I confronted her directly, asked to see her medical records or come with her to her next oncology appointment. She got immediately defensive, said I was being invasive and unsupportive, started crying about how hard it was to fight cancer while her own family doubted her. She refused to provide any proof. That's when I demanded an accounting of Grandma's estate. Danielle said the money was still tied up in probate. I contacted the probate court directly. The estate had been closed 11 months ago. The full amount had been dispersed to the executor, Danielle, who was supposed to distribute it to the beneficiaries. She'd kept all of it. $200,000 that was supposed to be split 3 ways. She'd stolen our inheritances and used the fake cancer story to explain away her sudden financial stability and to extract even more money from our grieving family. I gathered everything: Mark's testimony, the hospital's confirmation they had no record of her, the probate records showing she'd received and kept the full inheritance, screenshots of her GoFundMe inconsistencies. Then, I called a family meeting with Uncle Robert and our other relatives. I presented everything in front of them, showed them the probate documents proving Danielle had our inheritance, explained that the hospital had no record of her as a patient, had Mark on video call to confirm she'd faked cancer before, showed the timeline inconsistencies in her posts. Danielle tried to deny everything at first, then broke down and admitted it. She said she'd gotten into debt and panicked when Grandma died. She thought she could borrow from the inheritance temporarily and pay it back before anyone noticed. Then the debt got worse, and she created the cancer story to buy time and raise money to cover what she'd taken. She swore she was going to pay us back eventually. Eventually. She'd spent or hidden $200,000 and raised another $30,000 through fraud, and she expected us to believe she'd planned to make it right. Uncle Robert called the police right there. Danielle was arrested and charged with theft, fraud, and exploitation of the elderly since she'd stolen from an estate. The prosecutor added charges related to the GoFundMe scam. She's facing serious prison time. The fallout has been nuclear. Danielle's husband filed for divorce. He'd had no idea about any of it. Her kids are humiliated. Our extended family is completely fractured. Some relatives blame me for calling the police instead of handling it privately. They say Danielle needs help, not prison, and that I've destroyed her life and her children's stability. Her mother, my aunt, showed up at my house screaming that I'd sent her daughter to prison over money. She said family should protect family, that we could have worked out a payment plan instead of involving law enforcement. She said Danielle's kids are going to grow up with a mother in prison because of me. The thing is, I didn't just do this for the money. I did it because Danielle faked cancer. She let our entire family believe she was dying. Uncle Robert gave her $10,000 he'd been saving for retirement because he thought his niece was fighting for her life. People donated their hard-earned money thinking they were helping a cancer patient. She exploited grief, fear, and love for financial gain. But I also know her kids, ages 9 and 12, are suffering. They didn't ask for any of this. They're dealing with their mom being arrested, their parents divorcing, and the public humiliation of everyone knowing what she did. My cousin's daughter came to me crying, begging me to drop the charges so her mom could come home. My boyfriend says Danielle made her choices, and facing legal consequences is appropriate for the severity of what she did. My therapist says I should focus on my own healing rather than worrying about Danielle's consequences. But Uncle Robert has been distant with me lately. I think he wishes I'd told him privately first, instead of exposing everything in front of the whole family and immediately calling the police. Some family members have stopped speaking to me entirely. They think I was vindictive and wanted public humiliation rather than justice. Others thank me for exposing her before she could hurt more people. The family is permanently divided over this. I keep asking myself if I should have confronted Danielle privately first, given her a chance to return the money and come clean about the cancer lie before involving authorities. Maybe her kids wouldn't be suffering as much if I'd handled it differently. But then I think about how she looked me in the eye for months while faking cancer and stealing from our dead grandmother. And I don't know if she deserved that courtesy. Was I wrong to expose everything publicly and immediately involve the police? Or was that the only way to ensure real accountability? I reported my professor's plagiarism after he gave my research to his favorite student. Last semester, I, 23, was working on my senior thesis in biochemistry under Professor Davidson, 52. I'd spent 2 years developing a novel approach to enzyme synthesis that could have real applications in pharmaceutical manufacturing. This research was everything to me. I'd worked nights and weekends in the lab, turned down social events, poured my entire final year into this project. Professor Davidson seemed impressed with my progress. He'd review my data during our weekly meetings and always had encouraging things to say. I trusted him completely. He was supposed to be my mentor and advocate as I applied to graduate programs. In March, I presented my preliminary findings at a departmental seminar. It went really well. Other professors asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested. I felt like I'd finally proven myself after years of being an average student who suddenly found their passion. 2 weeks later, another student in our lab, Kyle, 24, presented at a regional undergraduate research conference. Kyle was Professor Davidson's golden boy. Always got the best equipment time and the most attention. I couldn't attend the conference because I had to cover a shift at my part-time job, but my friend Emma went and texted me during Kyle's presentation. She said Kyle's research sounded exactly like mine. Same enzyme targets, same synthesis approach, even similar data patterns. I told her that was impossible. We were working on completely different projects. She sent me photos of his presentation slides. My stomach dropped. It was my research, my methods, my preliminary data, my novel approach. Kyle had presented my work as his own. I confronted Professor Davidson the next day. He got defensive immediately, said Kyle's project had evolved naturally and any similarities were coincidental. I showed him the slides Emma had photographed. He said I was being paranoid and competitive, that this kind of overlap happens in research. Then he suggested maybe I should reconsider whether I was cut out for graduate school if I couldn't handle collaborative environments. Collaborative. He was calling it collaborative when I'd never even spoken to Kyle about my research. I went to Kyle directly, asked him where his research idea came from. He said Professor Davidson had suggested the approach to him back in January and had been giving him guidance on it. January. That was 2 months after I'd started showing Davidson my preliminary results, right around when my work started showing real promise. Kyle had no idea he was using my research. Davidson had fed him my methods and data without telling him where it originated. Kyle genuinely thought he'd been developing his own project under Davidson's mentorship. I felt betrayed on a level I didn't know was possible. This man was supposed to be preparing me for a career in research, and instead, he'd stolen my work to boost his favorite student. I realized Davidson had probably done this because Kyle was more likely to give him co-authorship credit and continue working with him in the future. I was graduating and leaving, so my research was less valuable to his career. I started documenting everything. I had dated lab notebooks with all my original work, emails to Davidson describing my methods, even drafts of my thesis chapters I'd sent him for feedback. I compiled it all into a folder, showing the clear timeline of my research development, and when Kyle's identical project had suddenly appeared. Then, I filed a formal academic misconduct complaint with the university. Not against Kyle, he was a victim in this too, but against Professor Davidson. I accused him of research misconduct for taking my original work and giving it to another student without my knowledge or consent, essentially stealing intellectual property from a student under his supervision. The university took it seriously. They launched an investigation, interviewed both me and Kyle, reviewed our lab notebooks and email correspondence. Kyle was horrified when he realized what had happened. He actually came to me apologizing, said he'd had no idea and felt sick about presenting my work. The investigation found that Davidson had indeed taken my research approach and data and given it to Kyle without disclosing the source. They determined it violated research ethics and student intellectual property rights. Professor Davidson got a formal reprimand, was removed from supervising undergraduate researchers for 2 years, and was required to take ethics training. But I wasn't done. I also discovered that Davidson had published a paper 3 years ago that had suspicious similarities to a former student's thesis. I found the thesis in the university archives and compared it to Davidson's paper. Whole paragraphs were nearly identical, just reworded slightly. The student wasn't listed as a co-author. I contacted that former student who's now in industry. She confirmed that Davidson had taken her work and published it without her knowledge or credit. She'd suspected it at the time but was too intimidated to report it as a new graduate trying to start her career. Together, we filed a complaint with the journal that published Davidson's paper. We provided evidence showing the work was primarily hers and that he'd published it without proper attribution. The journal launched their own investigation. Last month, the journal retracted Davidson's paper for plagiarism and failure to properly credit contributors. It was a major black mark on his publication record. His reputation in our field took a massive hit. Other former students started coming forward with similar stories. The university is now conducting a broader review of his entire research history. Davidson's career is essentially over. He's not allowed to supervise students, his publication was retracted, and he's facing possible termination depending on what the broader investigation finds. He's apparently taking medical leave for stress. His wife called me asking me to drop the complaints, saying I was destroying a man's life work over a misunderstanding. She said he has kids to support and a mortgage to pay. Kyle ended up having to restart his project from scratch with a different advisor. He lost a semester of work and won't be able to present at any conferences this year. He says he doesn't blame me, but I know this affected his academic trajectory. My own graduate school applications were complicated by the drama. Some programs saw me as someone who stands up for research integrity. Others worried I'd be a difficult student who causes problems. I did get accepted to a good program, but not my top choice. My parents think I was right to report the initial misconduct, but that going after his old publication was vindictive. My roommate says Davidson deserved everything he got for being a serial plagiarist. My lab partner thinks I should have stopped after the university investigation and let sleeping dogs lie instead of digging into his past. I genuinely believe what Davidson did was wrong, and that he'd been exploiting students for years. But I also know I went searching for more ammunition after the first complaint, because I wanted him to suffer more than just a reprimand. I wanted his career destroyed, the way he'd tried to steal mine. Was I wrong to keep pushing until his entire career collapsed? Or was I right to expose a pattern of misconduct? I ruined my former business partner's reputation after he sabotaged our startup to steal it. 3 years ago, I, 31, started a tech company with my college roommate Jake, 32. We'd been best friends for over a decade. The company was my idea, a project management software I'd been developing for 2 years before bringing him on. Jake handled the business side while I focused on the product. We were equal partners, 50-50 split on everything. The company took off faster than we expected. Within 18 months, we had legitimate investor interest and were bringing in 6 figures in revenue. We were on track to close a Series A funding round worth $3 million. Everything was finally coming together after years of struggling. Then, 2 months before the deal was supposed to close, Jake called an emergency board meeting. We only had 4 board members, me, him, and 2 early advisors. At the meeting, Jake presented evidence that I'd been mismanaging company funds. Fake receipts, forged expense reports, fabricated invoices. He claimed I'd embezzled nearly $80,000 over the past year. I was blindsided. None of it was real. I tried to explain that the documents were fraudulent, but Jake had done his homework. He'd created an entire paper trail that made me look guilty. The advisors voted to remove me as CEO pending an investigation. Jake assumed control of the company immediately. I hired a forensic accountant to prove my innocence, but it didn't matter. The investors caught wind of the drama and pulled out of the funding round. They didn't want to touch a company with leadership disputes and potential fraud. Our company valuation tanked. By the time I could prove the documents were fake, 3 months had passed, and the damage was done. Jake offered to buy out my shares at 10 cents on the dollar. He said it was generous considering the company nearly collapsed under my watch. That's when I realized this had been his plan all along. Tank the valuation, force me out, then buy my half of the company for nothing and rebuild it himself. I refused the buyout. He sued me to force the sale, claiming I was a liability to the company. The legal battle drained what little savings I had left. I ended up having to sell my shares anyway, just to pay my lawyers. Jake got my half of the company for less than $50,000, a company we'd built to be worth millions. The worst part was watching him rehabilitate the company's image. Within 6 months of me leaving, Jake had new investors lined up. He rebranded, launched an updated version of my software, and started getting press coverage about his innovative startup. He went on podcasts talking about overcoming adversity and making tough leadership decisions. He never mentioned my name or the fact that I'd created the entire product. I spent a year basically broke and depressed. My reputation in the startup community was destroyed. People thought I was the guy who'd embezzled from his own company. I couldn't get investors to return my calls for new ventures. Jake had effectively blacklisted me while positioning himself as some visionary entrepreneur. Then I found out something interesting. Jake's new head of engineering, a guy named David, had reached out to me through a mutual connection. He wanted to meet for coffee. I almost didn't go, figured it was some kind of setup, but I was curious. David told me he'd discovered something while reviewing the company's old code repositories. Jake had been stealing code from open-source projects without proper attribution, violating multiple licenses. Not just small snippets either. Entire core modules of the software were copied from projects that required attribution and prohibited commercial use. Jake had apparently been doing this since before he even pushed me out, and he'd continued after taking full control. David was uncomfortable with it and wanted out, but he thought I should know since it was technically my software being sold with stolen code. He gave me documentation of everything, commit histories, license agreements, all of it. I sat on that information for about 2 weeks, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to just walk away, start fresh somewhere else. But I kept thinking about Jake on those podcasts, talking about innovation and integrity, while he'd built his success on fraud and theft. My fraud and my theft, since it was my software he was profiting from. So I went nuclear. I contacted every open-source project he'd stolen from, provided them with evidence, and explained the situation. Several of them issued cease and desist letters immediately. I also reached out to the reporters who'd done puff pieces about Jake and his company, gave them the full story, including proof of the stolen code and documentation showing how he'd framed me. The story broke on a major tech news site. Other outlets picked it up quickly. Jake's company got hit with multiple lawsuits from open-source foundations. His investors started asking serious questions. The company's reputation went from rising star to cautionary tale in about 72 hours. Jake's biggest client, a Fortune 500 company, dropped their contract immediately because they couldn't risk association with stolen intellectual property. 2 more major clients followed. His investors demanded an independent audit. Within a month, the company's valuation had dropped by 60%. Jake called me absolutely furious, said I'd destroyed years of work over a grudge. I reminded him that it was my work he'd destroyed first, and at least I'd told the truth instead of fabricating evidence. He threatened to sue me for defamation. I told him to go ahead. Discovery would be fun. His company survived, but barely. He had to lay off half his staff and take out emergency loans just to settle the licensing violations. The rebrand he'd worked so hard on was associated with scandal now. He's still running the company, but it's a shell of what it was. I heard he had to bring on a new CEO because investors didn't trust him anymore. My career actually recovered faster than I expected. Once the truth came out about how Jake had framed me, people in the industry were sympathetic. I got offers to consult on other startups. I'm working on a new project now with actual trustworthy partners. But my family thinks I went too far. My mom said Jake's actions were wrong, but I could have just moved on instead of systematically destroying what he'd built. My sister pointed out that innocent employees lost their jobs when his company had to downsize. She's right about that. People who had nothing to do with what Jake did to me ended up suffering. I try not to think about that part. I tell myself they would have found other jobs, that it's not my fault Jake built his company on fraud. But sometimes, I wonder if I cared more about hurting Jake than about what was right. The open source communities deserve to know their code was being stolen, that part I'm sure about. But did I need to go to the press? Did I need to make it as public and damaging as possible? Jake's apparently in therapy now dealing with the stress. Part of me feels satisfied knowing he's struggling. Another part of me feels like I've become someone I don't recognize, someone who takes pleasure in other people's pain. Was I justified in exposing everything? Or did I take it too far by making sure his downfall was as public as possible? I sabotaged my sister's adoption after she tried to replace me as the family's success story. My sister Vanessa, 35, and I, 32, have always been competitive. Our parents constantly compared us growing up, which created tension between us. I was the academic one, got a full scholarship to a great university, landed a high-paying job in consulting. Vanessa struggled more, bounced between jobs, never quite found her path. Our parents were supportive of her, but I could tell they were disappointed she hadn't achieved what they'd hoped. 3 years ago, Vanessa married Tom, 38, who comes from serious money. Suddenly, she had the life everyone envied. Big house, luxury cars, constant vacations. Our parents started bragging about her lifestyle at family events. She'd post everything on social media, and our relatives would comment about how well she was doing. It bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Last year, Vanessa and Tom started the adoption process. They'd been trying for kids naturally without success and decided to adopt. Our parents were thrilled, constantly talking about becoming grandparents. Vanessa made the whole process very public, posting updates about home studies and paperwork. She framed it as this beautiful journey, and everyone ate it up. Then, 4 months ago, Vanessa announced they'd been matched with a birth mother. She was due in 2 months and had chosen Vanessa and Tom to raise her baby. Our whole family was celebrating. My mom actually cried during the announcement at Sunday dinner. Vanessa gave this speech about how she was finally finding her purpose in life and how motherhood was her true calling. That's when she made a comment that set everything off. She said, now, she'd finally be contributing something meaningful to the family legacy, unlike some people who just chase money and status. She looked directly at me when she said it. Everyone laughed it off as a joke, but I knew exactly what she meant. She was implying my career success was shallow compared to her becoming a mother. I smiled and congratulated her, but inside I was furious. I need to back up and explain something. Years ago, when Vanessa was 23, she had a baby. She'd gotten pregnant from a brief relationship and decided to place the child for adoption. It was a closed adoption, and our parents made her keep it extremely quiet. Only immediate family knew about it. Vanessa was ashamed and made everyone promise never to speak about it. She'd completely rewritten her history, and Tom didn't even know about it. She'd told him she'd never been pregnant before. I'd always kept her secret because, despite everything, she was my sister. But after that comment at dinner about meaningful contributions, something in me snapped. She was getting praised for adopting while pretending she hadn't given up her own child. The hypocrisy was too much. I thought about it for 2 weeks. Vanessa kept posting about preparing the nursery and attending adoption classes. Our parents hosted a baby shower for her. She gave interviews to a local parenting blog about her adoption journey. Everyone treated her like some kind of saint while I watched from the sidelines. So, I sent an anonymous message to the adoption agency. I didn't identify myself, but I provided specific information about Vanessa's previous pregnancy and adoption placement, including approximate dates and the state where it occurred. I suggested they might want to verify whether this information had been disclosed during the home study process, as previous placements are typically required to be reported. The agency launched a review. They contacted Vanessa and Tom, asking about previous pregnancies and adoptions. Vanessa initially denied everything, but they had enough information to investigate further. They found records of her placement from 12 years ago. She'd never disclosed it on any of her adoption paperwork. Tom found out about the baby she'd placed. He was devastated that she'd hidden something so significant throughout their entire relationship. The adoption agency flagged their application for providing false information during the home study. They said the issue wasn't that she'd placed a child for adoption, but that she'd deliberately concealed it when directly asked about previous pregnancies on official documents. The birth mother was informed of the situation and decided to choose a different adoptive family. She said she needed to trust the people raising her baby, and the dishonesty made her uncomfortable. Vanessa and Tom's adoption fell through completely. Vanessa had a breakdown. She knew it had to be someone in the family who'd told the agency, since so few people knew. She accused me directly during a family dinner. I denied it, said maybe the agency had found the records on their own during a background check. She didn't believe me but had no proof. Tom moved out temporarily. He felt betrayed that Vanessa had hidden something so major and lied on legal documents. Our parents were shocked when they found out she'd lied on the adoption paperwork. They tried to be supportive, but I could tell they were disappointed in her again. The adoption agency told Vanessa and Tom they'd need to restart the entire process if they wanted to try again, including new home studies and full disclosure this time. It could take years to be matched again. Tom wasn't sure he wanted to continue with adoption at all, given everything that had happened. Vanessa stopped posting on social media entirely. The family stopped asking about the baby. She had to tell everyone the adoption fell through without explaining why. I could tell she was humiliated, experiencing the same kind of disappointment from our parents that she'd probably felt when she was 23. My husband knows what I did. He thinks I'm cruel and that I destroyed my sister's chance at motherhood out of petty jealousy. He said even if Vanessa was wrong to lie, the baby and the birth mother deserved a good home, and I made sure that didn't happen with my sister. He's right that my actions affected innocent people, which I didn't fully consider. My best friend says Vanessa brought it on herself by lying on official documents and keeping secrets from her husband. But I know the truth. I wasn't reporting fraud out of moral obligation. I was angry that she was getting praised while dismissing my achievements. I wanted to knock her down after she'd implied I was shallow and meaningless. Vanessa's marriage is struggling. She's in therapy now, dealing with shame about both the placement years ago and the recent lies. Our relationship is basically destroyed. She won't speak to me, even though I keep denying involvement. Deep down, I think she knows it was me. I tell myself she shouldn't have lied on legal documents, that the agency deserved accurate information. But I also know I didn't report it for ethical reasons. I did it because I wanted her to fail after she'd made me feel like my success didn't matter. I wanted our parents to see her mess up again. The baby is with a different family now, one that presumably was honest on their paperwork. Maybe that's better. Or maybe I ruined a placement that would have been perfectly fine just because my ego was bruised. I genuinely don't know anymore. Was I wrong to report information that was factually true, but motivated by revenge rather than ethics? I tanked my neighbor's house sale after years of him making my disabled son's life hell. For the past 5 years, I, 41, have lived next to my neighbor Brian, 48. My son Ethan, 12, has autism and ADHD. He's a great kid, but he can be loud sometimes, especially when he's excited or overwhelmed. He stims by humming and rocking, and sometimes he has meltdowns that involve yelling. We've worked hard with therapists to help him manage, but he's still a kid learning to regulate his emotions. Brian has complained about Ethan since we moved in. At first, it was passive-aggressive comments about noise levels when we'd see each other outside. Then, it escalated to him banging on our shared fence when Ethan was having a meltdown in the backyard. He called the police twice, claiming we were disturbing the peace. Both times the officers were understanding once they saw Ethan's situation, but it was humiliating. The worst incident happened last year. Ethan was playing in our front yard, stimming and making happy noises because he'd just gotten a new video game. Brian came storming over and told Ethan to shut up, that he was too old to be acting like that, and that I needed to control my kid. He said this directly to my 12-year-old son. Ethan had a complete meltdown, and it took me an hour to calm him down. I confronted Brian and told him to never speak to my child that way again. He said if I didn't like it, maybe I should move somewhere more appropriate for someone like Ethan. Somewhere more appropriate. Like my disabled son didn't deserve to live in a regular neighborhood. I tried everything to keep the peace. I soundproofed Ethan's bedroom. We spent more time inside. I even sent Brian a letter explaining Ethan's diagnoses and asking for basic human compassion. He never responded. The complaints and hostile looks continued. Last month, Brian put his house up for sale. I saw the for sale sign go up and something in me just snapped after years of his cruelty toward my son. I knew how home sales worked. I knew potential buyers would do neighborhood research and talk to neighbors. I decided Brian didn't deserve to profit from selling his house without his future buyers knowing exactly what kind of person he was. When I saw people coming to look at Brian's house during open houses, I made sure to be outside with Ethan. Not making him perform or anything cruel like that, just doing normal activities in our yard, playing, talking, letting Ethan be himself. Several potential buyers asked me about the neighborhood and I was honest. I told them Brian had been harassing my disabled son for years, that he'd called the police on us multiple times for disability-related behaviors, and that he'd verbally abused my 12-year-old. I also left factual reviews on neighborhood websites. I didn't lie about anything. I stated that Brian had a history of not being accepting of families with disabled children and had made our lives difficult with constant complaints and hostile behavior. I included that he'd called the police on us for my son's autism-related vocalizations and had told my child directly to shut up. Word spread in the community. Other neighbors who'd witnessed Brian's behavior over the years started sharing their own stories on local Facebook groups. Turned out, several people had issues with him, but nobody had connected the dots. One family mentioned he'd complained about their kids playing basketball in their own driveway. Another said he'd threatened to sue them over a tree that partially shaded his yard. Brian's house sat on the market for 3 months with very little interest. In our area, houses usually sell within 3 weeks. His realtor told him they needed to drop the price. He reduced it by $30,000. Still no serious offers. He dropped it another $20,000. Finally got an offer for $75,000 less than his asking price, and he had to take it because his job was relocating him and he couldn't afford 2 mortgages. Before he moved, Brian came to my door absolutely furious. He knew I'd been talking to potential buyers and leaving reviews. He said I'd cost him tens of thousands of dollars and asked what gave me the right to sabotage his sale. I told him he'd spent 5 years making my disabled son feel unwelcome in his own home, and that buyers deserved to know who they'd been living next to. He called me vindictive and said I'd taken his harassment of a child and turned it into financial punishment. Yes, that's exactly what I did. His wife sent me an email last week. They'd been counting on that extra $75,000 for their kids' college funds. She said I'd hurt their entire family because of a personality conflict with her husband. She claimed Brian was just old-fashioned and didn't understand disability, that he'd never meant real harm. She said their kids were now going to have to take out more student loans because of my revenge. My husband fully supports what I did, says Brian earned every consequence. My sister thinks I went too far, that talking to buyers and leaving public reviews was calculated to cause maximum financial damage. She said I could have just been cordial and let the house sell normally without actively sabotaging it. My therapist pointed out that while my actions were legally fine, I should examine whether the outcome actually made things better for Ethan, or if I was just punishing Brian. The truth is, it didn't help Ethan. Brian's gone now either way. But I wanted Brian to pay a real price for years of tormenting my son, and money was the only language he seemed to understand. Some parents of disabled kids in my support group think I'm a hero for standing up to an ableist neighbor. Others worry I've set a precedent that makes our community look vindictive. A few pointed out that Brian's kids didn't do anything wrong, and now they're paying for their father's behavior. I keep justifying it by telling myself I only told the truth. I didn't lie to buyers. I didn't make anything up in my reviews. But I also know I strategically deployed that truth specifically to tank his sale value. I wasn't just being honest. I was weaponizing honesty to cause financial harm. Did I cross a line? Or was this justified payback for years of disability discrimination against my son? I torpedoed my stepmother's book deal after she wrote about my trauma without permission. When I was 15, something really bad happened to me. I'm 24 now, and I've spent years in therapy dealing with it. The only people who know the full story are my therapist, my dad, and unfortunately, my stepmother Claire, 41. My dad married her when I was 17, 2 years after the incident. She seemed supportive at first, always telling me how brave I was and how my story could help others. Last year, my dad mentioned that Claire had been writing a memoir. He seemed proud, said she'd been working on it for months. I didn't think much of it until Claire sat me down 3 months ago and told me her book had been picked up by a publisher. She was excited, talking about her advance and the release date. Then she casually mentioned that a significant portion of the book was about my trauma and how it affected our family dynamic. I felt sick. I asked her what exactly she'd written, and she got defensive immediately. Said it was her story too, her experience of joining a family dealing with trauma. She insisted she'd been vague about details and hadn't used my real name. I asked to read those sections and she refused, said I was being controlling, and that she had every right to write about her own life. I went to my dad. He admitted he'd known about the book's content, but thought Claire had handled it sensitively. He suggested I should be grateful that Claire cared enough to process our family's journey. Grateful. Like she was doing me a favor by profiting off the worst thing that ever happened to me. I told Claire that if she published anything about my trauma without my explicit consent, there would be consequences. She laughed and said I couldn't stop her. The book was already in production, and I had no legal grounds to prevent its publication, since she'd changed identifying details. She said I was being selfish and that my story could inspire other families. That's when I decided she needed to understand exactly what she was doing. I still had access to my dad's home office where Claire worked. Over the next 2 weeks, whenever I visited for dinner, I'd sneak in and photograph pages of her manuscript. She'd printed out the full draft with editor notes. I read every word she'd written about me, and it was so much worse than I'd imagined. She hadn't just written about the trauma itself. She'd included private details I'd shared during vulnerable moments, things I'd told her in confidence when I was still trying to accept her as a stepmother. She'd twisted conversations to make herself look like the patient saint dealing with a difficult stepchild. She described my therapy sessions based on things my dad had apparently told her, discussing my diagnoses and medications by name. The only thing she'd changed was my name, but anyone who knew our family would immediately know it was me. I made copies of everything. Then I started researching. I found out who her publisher was, who her editor was, and most importantly, I found their legal department's contact information. I also looked up the publication's ethics guidelines and social media policies. Then, I wrote a detailed letter explaining that I was the subject of a significant portion of Claire's memoir, that I'd never consented to my trauma being published, and that the manuscript contained private medical information and identifiable details despite the name change. I attached excerpts from the manuscript showing exactly how detailed and identifiable her writing was. I sent it to the publisher's legal team, her editor, and copied their ethics board. I also posted about it on social media without naming Claire or the publisher initially. I wrote about how violated I felt that someone had taken my trauma and monetized it without permission. The post went viral in therapy and trauma support communities. Thousands of people shared their own stories of family members exploiting their pain. The publisher put the book on hold pending a legal review. Claire's editor called her, panicking about the potential liability. Apparently, the legal team was concerned about right of publicity issues and the ethical implications of publishing someone's medical trauma without consent, even with changed names. Claire came to my apartment screaming 2 weeks ago. The publisher had canceled her book deal entirely. They'd cited concerns about consent and potential legal exposure. She'd have to return her advance, about $40,000 she'd already spent on paying off debt and buying a new car. She said I'd stolen her dream of being a published author, that I'd ruined her career before it even started. I told her she'd tried to steal my story and my pain for her own benefit. She said it wasn't the same, that she genuinely wanted to help people and I'd sabotaged her out of spite. My dad called me afterwards, furious. He said I'd humiliated Claire and damaged their marriage. He said the book could have been changed, that we could have worked it out, but instead I'd gone nuclear and cost them $40,000 they didn't have. My younger half-sister, Claire's daughter from her first marriage, sent me a long message about how I'd ruined her mom's chance at success. She's 16, and apparently Claire had been planning to use some of the book money for her college fund. Now, that money has to be paid back and they're struggling financially. Some friends think I did the right thing by protecting my privacy. Others think I could have tried to negotiate with Claire first, maybe asked her to revise the sections about me before getting the publisher involved. My therapist says I had every right to protect my story, but suggested I examine whether the outcome is actually making me feel better or just different. The thing is, I don't regret getting the book canceled. What I do regret is how it's destroyed my relationship with my dad and created financial problems for my half-sister who didn't do anything wrong. I also wonder if I could have handled it differently. Maybe threatened legal action first to force Claire to make changes, rather than going straight to the publisher. Claire's apparently trying to shop the manuscript to other publishers after heavily revising it to remove anything about me. But the social media attention made her recognizable, and publishers are wary. My dad barely speaks to me now. Family gatherings are incredibly awkward when I'm even invited. Did I go too far by tanking the book deal entirely? Or was I right to protect my privacy at any cost? My best friend stole my promotion, so I made sure everyone knew what she really did to get it. I, 28, have known Sarah, 29, since college. We've been inseparable for nearly a decade. We even ended up working at the same marketing firm 3 years ago, which felt like a dream at the time. We'd grab lunch together, vent about our boss, and celebrate each other's wins. Or at least, I thought we did. 6 months ago, a senior project manager position opened up. I'd been gunning for it since I started. I stayed late, took on extra clients, and even mentored junior staff. My manager, Derek, basically told me the job was mine. He said I just needed to nail the final presentation to the executive team. Sarah knew how much this meant to me. I practiced my pitch with her dozens of times in her apartment. The day before my presentation, I got food poisoning. I'm talking couldn't leave the bathroom for 12 hours kind of sick. I called Derek at 6 a.m. to reschedule, but he said the execs were only available that day. I was devastated. Sarah offered to deliver my presentation for me since she knew it by heart. I was hesitant, but she insisted she'd make it clear it was my work, and I'd just fallen ill. I trusted her. 2 days later, Derek called me into his office. He told me they were giving the promotion to Sarah. I was confused until he explained that she'd apparently been working on an alternative strategy that impressed them more than my approach. My data, my client case studies. She'd presented everything as her own original work. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She said I should have been there myself if it mattered so much, and that she improved my ideas anyway. She told me to be happy for her and stop being jealous. I couldn't believe this was the same person who'd been my best friend. That's when I remembered something. Something she definitely wouldn't want anyone at work to know about. I need to back up a bit. About a year ago, Sarah started dating someone from another department. His name was Marcus, and he was married. She told me everything because that's what we did back then. We told each other everything. She said Marcus was going to leave his wife, that they were already separated, all the usual lines. I told her it was a bad idea, especially since he worked at the same company, but she didn't listen. The affair lasted 4 months before Marcus cut it off completely. His wife never found out. Sarah was heartbroken and made me promise not to tell anyone. She was terrified it would ruin her reputation at work if people knew she'd been involved with a married colleague. I kept that promise because that's what friends do, but after she stole my promotion, I stopped seeing her as a friend. I didn't do anything immediately. I sat on it for 2 weeks, watching her parade around the office in her new role, using my strategies with my clients. She even had the nerve to invite me to her celebration dinner. I declined. Then I heard through the grapevine that Marcus was up for a director position. His wife worked in HR at a partner company we did business with. I'd met her once at a company mixer. Nice woman, didn't deserve what had happened to her, so I sent an anonymous email. Not to anyone at our company, but to Marcus's wife. I included dates, details about when they'd meet up, everything Sarah had told me in confidence. I made sure she knew her husband had been cheating during their marriage, not after any separation like he'd probably claimed. Within a week, Marcus's wife filed for divorce. She also happened to mention the affair to someone in our HR department, since it violated company policy about relationships. Both Marcus and Sarah got called in for meetings. Marcus got demoted and transferred to a different office. Sarah kept her position, but barely. The whole company knew what happened. People looked at her differently, whispered when she walked by. Her big promotion was tainted now. She knew it was me who sent that email. She showed up at my apartment one night screaming, calling me every name in the book. I just stood there and let her yell. When she finally asked why, I told her she knew exactly why. She tried to say what she did with the promotion was just business, but what I did was personal. I laughed at that. She made it personal the second she stole my work and told me to get over it. I'm not going to lie and say I feel terrible about it. I don't. She destroyed a friendship and my career opportunity without a second thought. Maybe I went too far by involving Marcus's wife, but that woman deserved to know the truth. Sarah's the one who had the affair. Sarah's the one who broke company policy. I just made sure the right people found out. My coworkers are split. Some think I'm justified. Others think I'm vindictive and should have just reported the presentation theft to HR instead. My roommate says I should have been the bigger person, but honestly, I'm tired of being the bigger person while people like Sarah get ahead by stepping on everyone else. I still work at the same company. Sarah avoids me completely now. I heard she's looking for jobs elsewhere. Part of me wonders if I ruined her career over something that maybe I could have handled differently. But then I remember her face when she told me to stop being jealous, and that feeling goes away pretty quick. Did I take it too far?